All right. Hello, everybody. So we've started the meeting recording. Looks like the live stream feature is having a little issue here. So we're just going to record and then we'll make sure that we can get the recording up digitally for folks afterwards. And so we're still admitting a few folks. It's 6:04. We're going to give it another minute and then we will get started. So thank you guys again for being here. All right. It's 6:05, so good evening, everybody. I'm Alderwoman Maria Haddon, and you are in a community meeting for a proposed development at 6929 North Sheridan. So I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. With me today from the office is Kyle, our Deputy Director, at the Ward office. And of course, we've got Sal and Mike from the development team. They'll have a moment to introduce themselves before they do their presentation. So I want to thank you all for joining the meeting. For those of you who are watching this as a recording, sorry you couldn't join us live, but just a refresher on our participatory zoning and planning development process. So the developer has made a proposal on our website. If you are ever interested in making a proposal for a development, we have detailed information about what it takes to kind of seek a zoning change and what our process looks like. So we require folks submit information, much of which you're going to see presented tonight, and then you will see it on our website after the meeting to us. We do an initial intake meeting to get an idea of what their plan is, what it's going to take. Sometimes we might review things with our Department of Planning and Development if there are questions about what kind of processes need to happen or when it's a bigger proposal like this one. And then we have a community meeting. So this meeting is for the community as a whole to hear from the developer about the proposal, to get information about what he is looking to do. And you guys will have time to ask questions. So if you have not attended one of our meetings before, I will facilitate. We will use the raise your hand function. If you are not familiar with Zoom and you can't figure it out, when we get to the time, you can unmute and ask questions. We can also use the chat for questions when the time is appropriate. We will have the recording of this available. So if there's something that maybe you didn't catch the whole meeting, maybe you didn't remember something, you're going to be able to go back and reference this. And then after the meeting, we also have a survey that'll be open for 2 weeks at minimum for folks to respond to and engage with. So today being Wednesday, we'll have information and like the recording and the survey out in the newsletter by this Saturday, so folks can start giving input on this and start engaging with this. And it makes it easy for you to share information with neighbors or family members if they weren't able to join the meeting tonight. So just a reminder that this won't be your last time to ask questions. So if we don't get to your question tonight, or if there's something that you think of after the meeting has ended, you can send information through the survey. You can call my office or you can email us, and we'll be happy to take your question and get this information back to you as soon as possible. Also, in these meetings, you guys, we're neighbors. So we are respectful, we are kind to each other, we are polite. We may have differences of opinions. I like to say Rogers Parkers have very strong opinions and we have strong feelings about things, and that's what makes us awesome. So we're cool with strong opinions and strongly held viewpoints here, just as long as people are expressing them in a respectful way, and making space for other people's opinions that might be different than your own. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Sal and Mike to introduce themselves, share a little bit about themselves, and we're going to get right into the presentation.
All right. Can you hear me? Good evening, everyone. Sal here again, and this is Mike. And hopefully we'll present this project to you guys and look forward to your feedback on some of the items that we want feedback on, and go from there.
Do you want to share a little bit about yourselves? Tell us your last names, company, and where you're at today.
Sure. Sal Siraj, and today we're representing Chicago Equity Partners. And Mike here.
Mike Moresso. I work with MC and Associates, architectural structural firm in downtown Chicago.
Yep. We're both Chicago natives and born and raised and do business here in Chicago.
Great. Go ahead and get that screen share going, and we can jump into the presentation.
Great. Great. All right. Able to see the screen?
Yes.
Uh, are you seeing all the video footage on
Nope.
my right?
Nope. We've got the appropriate view.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so we'll kick it off here. This is a project at the corner of Sheridan and Morse. Um, Currently, it's a vacant building that at one point was Leona's restaurant. It's been dilapidated since it was last in use. Um, Looks like this right now. We're proposing an 81 unit building here with 20% of it being affordable. And yeah, we'll go right in.
A six, we're proposing a masonry 6-story, 81 unit building, 16 to 17 affordable units, 42 on-site parking spaces, consisting of each floor plate will consist of about 16 two-bedroom units and two single bedroom units. Um, Total square footage on the building would max out at around 78,000 square feet, again, over 6 floors. Um, we propose parking on the ground floor in this scenario. Sal will talk about that in a few minutes. Um, each unit most likely have their own personal balcony space. Um, each unit would be have access to exterior space like exterior walls, elevator building. Yeah, that's about the extent of it.
So yeah, I'll just take that back to the beginning um, of the presentation here. One of the things I want to highlight is we didn't do any studio units in this building, and even the one bed units are only two per plate versus um, yeah, so mostly more family oriented two-bedroom units is what we are proposing here in this project. This is a rough rendering of what the building we propose the building to look like. Um, Once we get further along, we will yeah, modify it. This is this site sits on a few different parcels. There is this parcel here in front of me, and if you can see my cursor, right? Okay, great.
Yes.
So this is the main parcel along Sheridan Road at the intersection of Sheridan and Morse. But then also we have another parcel in the back that we'll talk about in a later slides. The main building we're proposing is going to be sitting on this parcel here. And for the rear lot, we have some ideas, and also we want some input from the community about what the community wants from that parcel. Currently, the building is zoned, or the land is zoned for B31. We're seeking a change to a B35, which allows us to get more, yeah, maximize the use of the land with the residential component of the development. As Mike mentioned, we're proposing a 42 car parking, ground floor with parking, and then some additional parking, that back lot that we talked about, as well as an additional 40 bike parking spaces. And yep, this is what the site plan looks like. The building would be the shaded area here with a setback from the alley for the building. This is the ground floor plan that we are proposing, which is mostly parking right now. However, once we go to a later slide, we'll see that we also have an idea of maybe using some of that space at the ground floor for something like a cafe for the community. And so that's something that we would want some feedback on, but otherwise it would just be parking. We'd lose a few spaces if we did the coffee shop indoor parking, but we could probably make up for it with the pad on the outside. This is what a typical floor plate would look like from floors 2 to 5, with just units along exterior walls, and then there's a courtyard that runs around the center of the building to provide natural light and for the other units. As Mike mentioned, each floor only has 2 1-beds, and the rest are all 2-bed units. The top floor, we're proposing sort of one section of the building to be units, and then the rest of it, an indoor rec space for tenants, and then a green room, and then a rooftop terrace. So that's our proposal for the top floor. Some things we wanted to just address is things like the environmental components. We're planning to do electric appliances, electric water heaters, furnaces, as well as chargers for electric cars, and a green roof, of course. One of the things we wanted to address is about parking. And so what we did was we studied some of the parking of other buildings in the area, and as well as new developments in the city, to establish sort of what the parking need is. And this is data based on the Center for Neighborhood Technology here. And it seems that the utilization of a lot of infill Chicago projects of parking spaces is not as high, according to the Center for Neighborhood Technology. But it seems like the average is around one car parking for every 2 units that are being built. This is a transit-oriented project. It's on Sheridan Road, and so it is a TOD project. We also went ahead and looked at some of the other buildings that were built in the area to just see what the parking ratios were for those projects. So here we have 7,000 Glenwood, which has a 1 parking for every 2 units ratio. And then 7070 Clark, which has a little bit of a lower ratio, and they have a total of 20 spaces for the 54 units. We also compared some of the closer properties. And so, for example, at 1250 Morris, we have 172 units with 49 parking spaces. 6825 Sheridan is a 1-to-2 ratio. And here at 6919 Sheridan, we have 56 units, 39 parking spaces. And here we have at 6972, 60 units with 40 parking spaces. The other thing we wanted to sort of analyze was the height of the building in comparison to other buildings in the area. And obviously, right next to us on the south of this property, there is a larger apartment building. The height of that would be very comparable to it, or the height of our proposed building would be very comparable to that. But these are some other buildings in the immediate area and sort of the comparison of the heights. Now coming to things that we want a lot of input from the community and the alderman's office is things about what the community needs in terms of um, um, like utilization of the space, of course. Um, and so one of the thoughts we had was doing a cafe at the ground floor, something either a local regional brand of coffee, and then maybe doing something along this parkway for seating and there'd be seating indoor as well, but just outdoor seating since because of the proximity to the lake. We had we think it would be a sort of a nice addition to create a nice little community space here. Um, so the feedback that we're looking for is, this is our thoughts. We're happy to listen to the feedback and see what the neighbors and the neighborhood would like to see there. And I think the alderwoman can place this into her feedback form so that we can get more feedback and adjust this. Or if the idea of a cafe is good, then um, we can run with that. Now we're going to that real parcel that we talked about earlier. So this is the proposed new building adjacent to this existing apartment building. And this is the rear lot that we're talking about here. Currently, or during when Leona's was open, I believe this was used as additional parking for the restaurant. It is accessible only through the alley. Um, and we would like some input from the community about what you would like to see there. Uh, Parking, I think, is obviously, I don't think there's ever enough parking in that area. So maybe, allowing neighbors to be able to have access to this parking space um, or something. Or maybe if we're doing the cafe and we have to move some of those parking spaces from inside the unit, we could relocate those outside. Some other ideas were maybe doing some artwork over there or a small dog walk um, space. And that's the green area that kind of drew there. Um, but yes, we'd love to get some feedback about that. It's just a large view of this real parcel. It could just be additional parking, get a couple more parking spaces here, or we could do a mix of it. Really open to ideas here. And the last thing is the name. We came up with a name based on the bells at the Loyola University, which is close by to us. But we're also happy to name it after something else that might be significant to the immediate neighbors and the neighborhood as a whole. And so that's the background how we got there and the opinions that we'd like to hear for the community. And with that, I can open it up to questions.
Thanks, Sal. All right. So for those who have questions, comments, please use the raise your hand function. You can find that under the reactions. So if you see the react, you can find the kind of raise your hand piece there. So I will start with folks who've raised their hands, and then we'll also come to the chat for questions. I'm going to keep the um, screen sharing up for now in case we need to reference something. But if it becomes unnecessary at some point, we'll stop the screen sharing so that we have a little bit easier visibility. All right. So I've got Mark Jacobs up first. Mark, please go ahead.
Hey, can you hear me?
Hi,
Yes.
Mark.
Cool. Hey, thanks for your presentation. I'm really supportive of this project. I live down the street on Morse. I walk this street to and from the park and the beach all year round. And it's really uh, it's been hard to watch what's happened to that lot in the meantime since Leona's closed. So I'm happy that we're doing something with it. And 81 units, it's great to see that kind of density brought to the neighborhood. And I'm seeing in the comments that, and a lot of people are commenting on the number of affordable units. I think 16 is more than zero. So let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good here. This is a good opportunity to get people into Rogers Park, let more people into the neighborhood. I have a 1.5-year-old daughter. You might hear her in the background. We plan on sending her to the neighborhood schools. I want her to have classmates here, but our amenities, the CTA, our businesses, our schools, they won't stay strong forever if we don't let more people into the neighborhood and get more foot traffic to our businesses, Common Cup, Morse Market. So yeah, I feel like I say this every time I'm on one of these calls, but yeah, let's let more people in. I'm all in on this. This is a great opportunity, I think. So I again, thanks for presenting, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mark.
I just want to make a couple of things clear that I might have missed. We're not seeking any subsidies or assistance. Normally, when you have more affordable units, there's a subsidy coming from some government entity. This is completely private, funded through private investment into the neighborhood. There's no public dollars going into this project to subsidize the affordable units. So that's the first thing. And the other thing is the use of the space as Leona's. I'm not sure if Ted's here or not, the owner. But Ted had leased the space at some point, and the condition is extremely dilapidated, and restoring it to restaurant use would be so costly that it's not really feasible at this point. So those are just some things that I wanted to mention.
I think so.
Thank you for your
Ne-
comments.
Next up, I've got Julie Peterson.
Hi, thanks for this meeting. And just to prove the point you made earlier about the diversity of opinions in Rogers Park, I'm extremely opposed to this project. And there's a number of different reasons. One of them, and perhaps the chief reason, is somebody mentioned it in the chat as well. Sheridan Road is not any of those other roads. It's already a bad street to be on, driving a car anytime in the morning rush hour or evening rush hour. And coming at Sheridan from Morse, the crowds, the traffic, the increase in traffic is, I don't know. So I guess I would like to ask, has a traffic study been done of the impact of this? Also, I understand, I agree that it's been sad to see the Leona's, fall into such disappearance, disrepair. It's such a, negative uh, thing. But that shouldn't, that by itself doesn't mean we should build a 6-story apartment building. I understand that there's, a desire to have it utilized and that it can't be a restaurant. But does it have to be something that's going to add so much traffic? So much traffic.
Sure. Thanks a lot
So I guess,
yeah, go ahead. Continue.
no, I was just going to say, the traffic and the additional congestion is something that I think is, just going to be very complex for the area.
Oh, thanks so much, Julie. I don't know how many parking spaces there currently are, but I believe it's probably around the same amount of parking that we're proposing. So whatever traffic was there, it would be, I think, significantly less than if it were a restaurant use or any other kind of retail use. There'd be a lot more traffic going in and out throughout the day. Um, uh,
Sure.
and for any kind of a sort of a service or quick service business. So that's sort of a thought. There's always going to be traffic, I think, regardless of what kind of development you're going to build. And yes, I agree with you. Sheridan is a busy road. Um, but just keep in mind that if it were anything else, there's still going to be parking, there's still going to be cars, unless we keep it vacant land and build a park or something. But thanks for your comment. I appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you, Julie. Next up, we have Erin.
Hello, my name is RN Dragon. I
Sorry.
am a resident of the neighborhood. I live extremely close to this project. And I have a few concerns, mostly on the design of the building. I feel like for this site, for this property, that the height and bulk are a bit out of character for the neighborhood. Part of the reason I say that is because I've seen a number of buildings that feel too large being built in the neighborhood. They have zero lot lines, they're really maxed out, they appear to be somewhat low quality. And some of the buildings I'm talking about are examples I've seen in this presentation of comparable buildings in the neighborhood. And to be honest, that has me a bit concerned. 7,000 North Glenwood, it provides needed housing for the neighborhood, yes, but it appears somewhat low quality. It was built very quickly, and it really does not give anything to the neighborhood except for housing. The large brick buildings that are popping up on Morse between Sheridan and the CTA station, two or three of those were also cited in this presentation. They are overly large compared to what's next to them. They are aesthetically uninteresting to ugly, depending on your point of view. And that sort of aesthetic is not the direction I would like to see this neighborhood go. We have a very diverse housing stock, very diverse building stock, but this trend of overly large brick buildings, I don't think is the way that we want to go. So that's one of my concerns about the design is the aesthetic. Another concern of mine is the bulk. I feel like this is going to be somewhat aggressive to the neighbors next door. And I also have a few comments about the first level that you're talking about putting cafe spaces in. Based on this rendering that is on screen, this is not a very pedestrian friendly facade. I'm going to be very blunt here. This starts to look a little bit like a prison. This is not a place, especially considering all the vacant cafe spaces less than a block north of here, that I can see being a welcoming space for a cup of coffee, anything comparable to the many coffee shops we have in the city. So I've been talking for a bit long here, and I do apologize for that. But I would suggest that, yes, we absolutely need housing. We need affordable housing, and we need buildings that take parking into consideration. But I think that in order to fit in with this neighborhood, that some significant redesign needs to happen.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, I just want to comment on this. Maybe Alderwoman Haddon was about to say the same thing. This is a lakefront protection, part of lakefront protection ordinance here, so it will go through design revisions, and with a private lakefront commission, and they usually will look at or suggest designs elements that are that they feel are going to be more suitable for the site.
The only other thing I would add to that as well for Aaron and others is this is what this meeting is for. So this is helpful information. So you didn't talk that long. And when we do the survey, so whether it's the survey that you fill out or if there are visuals of things that you guys are thinking about of like, hey, you know what, this is, as you talk about more of the types of things you'd like to see, we can make sure there's space for that in the survey, or you can always email them to our office, kind of referencing this, if it's helpful for you to give any visuals, along with some of the feedback and suggestions that you're sharing tonight. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And before I go, I just have two questions for the development team. The first question is, who will be the owner of this building and who will be the property manager? The reason I'm asking that is there are a handful of landlords who are buying up an extraordinary amount of building stock in the neighborhood and driving rents higher and higher and higher. And I'm curious if this building is going to be owned or managed by one of them. My other question, and this is more conceptual, what does this building give to the neighborhood in exchange for the upzoning? We need housing, yes, but we need a little bit more than that. We are a neighborhood, and right now I don't feel this building respects the neighborhood.
Sure. Like the Alderwoman hadn't said, we're here for feedback. We asked about sort of services. If you don't want a cafe, you could welcome to tell us what kind of services we can put in the building to help bring something to the neighborhood besides housing and the affordable units. Um, and to answer your question about the ownership, we're not related to any of the entities that are developing housing or buying the housing that you're referring to. We haven't selected a manager, but the beneficial interest is an investment company, and we're not related to the exist. We actually don't own anything in terms of apartments in the ward.
Can you tell us who the investment company is, or is that confidential?
Chicago F9 Equity Partners.
Great, thank you. And
Thanks.
thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thanks for your questions. All right, next up is Viral.
Thank you so much, Alderwoman Haddon, and thank you to the folks who are bringing this presentation to us. I support this project. I live a few blocks away, but I've walked past this lot so many times on my own way to the lake, and I think about like, yeah, this is land that is not doing anything to the neighborhood. It is not providing any resource. It is not housing anybody, and it is not generating property tax revenue, which is desperately needed for our city. And this would do all of those things. It would take a vacant lot and it would turn it into housing. And it would, in doing so, generate property tax revenue for our city, which would benefit all of us in the long run. And I'm sure there's other arguments people are going to make for and against this project. I want to take a very different angle as to why I think this is a project worth supporting, because I love Rogers Park so much, and I know so many people who love this neighborhood. And actually, like Alderwoman Haddon, I have very strong ties to the state of Ohio, and I've had a lot of queer and trans and people of color friends visit me here in Rogers Park, and they absolutely love it here so much, and they want to move here so bad, um, because they see how wonderful of a place we've built here in Rogers Park, and in Chicago and Illinois. But the problem is that there isn't enough affordable housing for them to physically live here. There is just not enough places for people to live. And I think in this political moment where I know so many people who, if they could get a chance to move to a place like Rogers Park, they'd take it in a heartbeat because they are fearing for their lives in states across this country. And I would love to be able to tell them that there is a place for them here. And I know a lot of you on this call, you feel that way too. You take pride in the fact that Rogers Park is a sanctuary in a sanctuary in a sanctuary. But it can't actually be that if there is physically nowhere for anybody to live. And there will be nowhere for anyone to live if we don't support building more housing like this. I don't really care about the aesthetics of the building. I'm not an architect. I don't have any taste. I don't know how to decide if a building looks nice. I don't know if my building looks nice. What I know is it houses me. And that's all that matters for me. And it's affordable. And so I support any effort to build more affordable housing in our ward. And so I support this project. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your comments.
Thanks, Viral. Next up, we have Stephen Weinberg.
Hi, a couple questions. How many square feet are you proposing for the 2 bedrooms and the 1 bedrooms? I don't think you addressed that. I'm unclear if the parking is going to be on that second lot or if there's going to be garage space on the first floor. And if there is garage space on the first floor, is everything going to be accessible from Morris in the alley? And then my final question is actually more for the alderman. When you put out your community survey, there are a number of individual property owners around that their property values will be certainly affected by an 81 unit building going in. I'm wondering if an interesting metric would be to put into your survey is if people responding are property owners or non-property owners in the neighborhood. Thank you.
We'll let Sal go first.
Sure. You had a couple of questions. The unit sizes, first let me go to the unit floor plan here. This is the ground floor plan that we did show earlier. We're proposing either having at all parking or parking and that little red box area may be cut out for retail space like a cafe or something else. And then in addition to that, we're also proposing using all or some portion of the lot in the rear for some additional parking that's not garaged.
And I think
That's
on the parking question, there was also a question about the entrance to the
yeah,
is the entrance all off the alley?
absolutely. There would be no curb cuts on either Sheridan or on Morse. Your other question about unit sizes, the unit sizes will range anywhere from 650 to 1,000 square feet is what we are anticipating.
So 1,000 square foot for a 2 bedroom?
Yes.
Okay.
And the last question, Stephen, about property owners or not, we could add it. I'll say we right now what we put in our surveys is kind of proximity. And I will say that whether you're a property owner or not a property owner, everyone's paying property taxes and paying for housing. We're also 75% renter in the 49th ward. And so it is not, I don't think we've ever asked that question on our surveys. And I don't know that it would provide me with any useful information in my decision making. So I'll think about it, but I don't know that it would be a useful metric to know how, and I think it might provide, yeah, I don't think it would change my decision making process. And, but interesting question. All right.
Thank you.
Alderman, I also wanted to add one thing about the property tax revenue that the gentleman before those bought. This is currently a vacant piece of land, and we do have like you rightfully said, we do have a budget issue, taxes going up repeatedly to cover the deficits we have. And sure, one building or one project is not going to solve everything. But the revenue for tax revenue, which would dramatically increase from the current property taxes, which would help pay its fair share.
Yeah. And of course, in the way this works too is new properties help to share the tax burden with us. So thanks for that. Thanks, Stephen. Trudy and Bill, you're up next.
Okay, thank you. First of all, are all the stakeholders in the project the same stakeholders that wanted to develop the Warner storage building? And the second question is, are you planning to drive in piles to support the building and to address the water that is coming in from the lake?
First question I'll answer, no, this is not anyone related to the Housing for All team, which purchased the Warner Storage Building and the currency exchange property. So that's a totally different group. The second question I'll leave for the development team.
Most likely there would be piles that have to be driven into the ground to support the building. It depends on the strength of the soil and the amount of water that's in the soil when we do that test. So that'll be taken care of as structurally sound.
And you you haven't tested it yet about how much water is under the building.
No, I don't believe we have, or nor the strength of the soil as well. Not yet. that would be further down the line.
Yeah, they're early because they need approval from myself in order to kind of successfully get the zoning change they need. And so it's also, you guys do not currently own this property, is that correct?
I'm sorry?
I said, you don't currently own
No,
the
no,
property.
we don't currently own it. We're under contract with the owner,
Yeah.
contingent to an approval.
Yeah. So process-wise, Trudy, a lot of times they want to know that it's something that they can do before they move further along on spending money to get some of the determinations. I will also say, as a note for folks too, this is just our ward process that I implement to really get is I think, well-rounded feedback and input to help inform my decisions to make sure that we're getting, I think, the best decisions that we can possibly get on matters of zoning. But this does not supersede, nor does it even match the types of process that this proposal, should it move forward, will have to go through. Obviously in the zoning committee for the change, but also it's in our lakefront protection ordinance, and there's a whole detailed application covering like 13 points of consideration and review. It has to go to Plan Commission, which is one of our most thorough review processes. And so, as they mentioned, this is a rendering of kind of facade, and this is their plan. But should this proceed, the Department of Development and the Plan Commission themselves might have a lot of feedback that could make this project look and feel different should it proceed.
And this is just a rough template.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, Bill, you have a question?
Thank you. Have you done a traffic survey? Have you inspected the sewers? Have you researched any of that? Is the first question, and then also, does Ted Mavrakis still own it, and will he own it after the development is done?
So Ted is the seller of the property, and we would be purchasing it from Ted. So no, there would be no ownership of Ted. That's the first question. As Alderman said, this is the first step in our process. We need to get through these hoops before we proceed with more construction-related matters, and site assessment, soil testing, etc. So that's sort of a process that we'll be doing once we hear the hoop, depending on the feedback and whether or not the alder supports this project.
Thank you.
Great.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Next up is Dan Numa.
Hi, I'm actually named Leah. It's my partner's
Oh.
thing, and I couldn't figure out how to change it. So I have a couple of questions. I've actually lived in Rogers Park since I was born. And so I feel very invested in this community and also a bit sad about what's happening here. This is historically a community of artists, of people who are off the beaten path. And some of the appeal and beauty of this neighborhood is the beauty of the buildings, the old buildings, the fact that the lakeshore is accessible, the buildings aren't very high. So I thank you to the people who are proposing this development. I just want to applaud that you're considering our input, which means a lot. I personally, I feel a lot of trepidation around something like this going up. I'm worried about how long construction would be going on. I live across the street. I know that when construction happens, it also shakes up the ground and lots of rats and mice come out. So that's an issue. I'm wondering why it needs to be so tall. It's nice to not have a congested skyline. I also am concerned about the way that this building looks. It doesn't look like there's a lot of care in the design, and it kind of looks like a prison. The windows are really small and skinny and tall, and that is like how prison windows look. I am concerned about the affordability. I know you're saying there's going to be 16 affordable units, but who holds you accountable to do that? And what does that really mean? Who is it affordable for? The square footage is like doable for a family of 1,000 square feet. It's not like a huge amount, but I'm concerned because like the real issues in our community are there are actual low income people who live in Rogers Park who are being priced out by developers. There's tons of them. Once you pass Tui going north on Sheridan, there's a development company that's bought up like almost every single building, and then they create these like micro luxury apartments that are too expensive for anybody to live in. And so it kind of ruins the character of our neighborhood. This neighborhood, I love it because there's so many artists here. I'm an artist, I'm a musician. We're getting priced out, and people move to places because of cafes, because of artists, because of the things going on. If we're just a bunch of buildings that aren't very pretty and are expensive to live in, then who's going to live here? What is this community going to be? I'm wondering, like, what are you giving back to the community? What is this for?
Leah,
So those are the questions. Thank
all
you.
right. Leah, thank you. And it was Leah, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to try to just read back to you the questions to pull them out. Because I know you had a few in there. So one of the
Yeah.
questions, I'm going to work backwards. So please just inject if I've missed one. And Sal, this is for you and Mike. So the final question was kind of, hey, what's the community benefit, right? Like, what are you kind of bringing to the community? What are you giving back to the community, given the context of what you've spoken to? I know there was a
Hmm.
question there about the pricing and a concern around affordability, like, hey, 16 units, is that enough, right? We need more affordable housing. So I heard that expressed as a concern. Is that accurate? Um,
Yeah, that's accurate. And this feels like it's for Loyola students. I mean, I agree that Loyola students should have housing, but they mostly have housing. I feel like issues for any university community with housing for students is ones who are super low income, who are like living in their cars.
yeah.
So I
And
just don't
then,
know that this is necessary, this building here,
and you also had concerns around height and size,
height
right?
and size. Yeah.
So height and size, kind of that piece. And you had some concerns around the impacts of construction as well, correct?
Yeah.
Did I
Yeah.
miss anything?
Yeah, like if you're gonna build it and this gets approved, can you just make it shorter and make it pretty? Like hire an architect who's like really passionate about their work. Why do we need to keep doing things on the cheap just to like make a profit? Let's move against this trend and start to support people who are passionate about their work and passionate about really building community rather than building capital.
All right, so I debriefed for you guys already. So Sal and Mike, it's all you on your responses.
Sure. There's a a few questions there. Um, First thing is that in terms of the building design, the windows. If you actually look at this floor plan here, you can see the proposed windows. While they look, I might have I should have started by saying that this is a rendering that is very preliminary, and it's being photoshopped um, onto Street View. So it may not reflect what the actual building design is going to be, and definitely will not. It's not going to look the same. Bricks don't look like that in real life. It's just what we have to work with to try to quickly share vision. The alternative to that, which a lot of developers will do, is actually um, um, do this as a 2D rendering or 2D facades. We just wanted to give it a little bit more more of a realistic feel, but it's definitely not anywhere close to what a real it doesn't this is not what real brick looks like. This is brick. So it's just the software rendering that makes it look that way. It's actually not cheap to build in this way. The details here are actually a lot costlier than just doing an entire brick facade, as a lot of projects are done. So there is it's definitely not designed for
It's not final.
yeah, it's not the final design, and also it's also not the cheapest facade. Brick is not a cheap facade to do. And adding details like stepping things around, it actually increases the cost. And again, not final, here for input. And And then more important than anything is that, like I said, normally these kinds of things are not reviewed. The design is not reviewed. In this case, the project and the design elements are actually reviewed, and through the private lakefront, who will definitely impact the end result here. That's the sort of the questions about the exterior, as well as the windows here. They look like this. Again, it's a render laid over on Photoshop over a photo. So the compression may not be correct, but if you look at the floor plan, you'll actually notice that the windows are pretty sizable in comparison with the rooms. So they're roughly, like, that section is probably 6 feet, which is pretty big.
But how much space is there between that window and the one across from it?
I'm sorry?
It looks like there's a little courtyard in there that's like 6 feet wide. So you get a
No,
window.
no. See, like, it is significantly larger than 6 feet. 6 feet might be like that little thing is 6 feet there. So
Mhm.
it's much larger than that. It just looks like this. This is this um on a computer screen.
I
One of
don't
the,
know. These people still aren't gonna be getting much light. It looks like it could be as wide as the side of the building. But I
well,
mean, look, here's something. You guys
but
obviously have money and investment, and our community does need that. I wonder if there's a way that you can partner with artists and like community figureheads and builders here about what's needed and like let's work together to do something.
but
Yeah, that's exactly why we're here, and happy to take input from everyone here.
We need a longer conversation than just this, though, and there's not, a ton
so
of
I'm
people in
gonna,
here.
I'm gonna,
I'm
I'm
sorry.
gonna,
Thank you,
I'm,
Maria. Thank you
no,
so
it's all
much.
good. But I wanna say, like, yes, right? And that is, this is, I know a lot of times, folks, everybody's busy. People have lives. You guys work, so you're not necessarily engaged on every step of the process. We rarely have project proposals for projects of this size or scope. So most of the times when we have a community meeting about a proposed development, we typically have one meeting because it's a pretty straightforward thing. Like, hey, we don't have a lot of land, we don't have a lot of new developments. So this is not going to be your last opportunity to give input, right? Like they don't have final renderings, right? There will be other opportunities for community input. So I think those are all really good points to bring up. This is they're kind of at the beginning of their ideation process, right? This is one of their times where they're like, all right, here's what we're thinking. Let's hear from the community. And then what are they going to come back to us with, right? And then how do we kind of refine as we get to the process? So I think they're all really good points and well taken. Yeah. So thank you for that.
The affordable component. So the city of Chicago has anytime you request a zoning change or you do a zoning change for a building more than 10 units, the city of Chicago enforces a 20% affordable requirement upon the builder, and they will not issue your permit until you satisfy the affordable requirement. So they follow up. They won't give you a building permit until you sign a contract with them saying that you're providing the 20% affordable. The 20% affordable is based off I believe it's 60% of the average or mean. Um,
Median
thank you.
Meaning.
In, rental.
income, area
Uh,
median income.
Area meeting.
yep. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. We're going to continue. I've got Darren Gladfelter up next.
Good evening. Thanks so much for hosting this presentation. Really appreciate all the hard work that you put into this. But I have to say that as somebody who lives directly across the street, I'm adamantly opposed to this project. Just want to speak to some points that people have been bringing up regarding affordable housing. I walk my dog frequently in this neighborhood. I see for rent signs everywhere. So, places that don't look like they'd be very much, I admittedly don't know, but I do see a lot of for rent signs. Um, I do want to say that the concern that this is a concession for Loyola students is very real. You can say that it's for families all you want, but you have no control over who gets to rent there. And I have a feeling that there's been such an aggressive push by Loyola to expand, that this is a reflection of that. And you guys kind of played your whole card when you named it after a location at Loyola. So, I'm going to say that we're not suckers, and, I won't be licked like that. Uh, but to be really, really honest here, you are going to be creating a traffic and safety nightmare at a point where I was going to bring up how many accidents happen at that intersection of Morrison and Sheridan. Um, it's Fury Road out there. If you have driven it at any given time, it is dangerous. People take that aggression all the way to Lakeshore Drive. It's insane. I see it every morning. But what I also see is the number of accidents that happen there, including the one that happened there today when somebody who looked like they were very angry about having to wait again for someone turning left decided to plow right through, hit a car, that car hit another car, and those cars were both disabled, causing even more traffic. So if you're going to start a massive construction project, and this is massive, and have, only that many parking spaces, you're going to cause a lot of congestion going in and out. But I'm worried about the congestion that this construction will bring. Um, and if I can, just add in, having lived across that ridiculous eyesore that is Leona's, but like so many other eyesores throughout our neighborhood, I was wondering, why wasn't more economic development done to bring a wonderful location where artists can meet, an artist cafe, or in my wildest dreams, a sports bar where I can go and watch the Packers destroy the Bears twice a year. I'm not looking for everything under the sun here, but it would be nice to know that some effort was made to try to make that a beautiful restaurant that had all the potential in the world to, with that
Darren,
proximity to the lake.
Darren, you lost us with the bear slander.
You're gonna have to forgive me, but my pride in Wisconsin is real.
It's all good. Let me answer. I'm gonna. I know you might still have some more things to say, but I will say, just to share, I've been in office for 6 years. We've probably had a dozen proposals of things that the Rogers Park Business Alliance, and community members have brought to this site. And unfortunately, the owner has gone back between whether he wants to sell it, whether he wants to rent it. I apologize. This is not meant to be super negative, but he originally, I'm not sure what all his original intents were when he purchased it, and operated it as a Leona's for a little bit, and I think ruined the Leona's restaurant, and then closed the restaurant. But the initial proposal before I was even sworn into my first term was for a high rise that didn't even make it off my desk. But as it's been closed, I mean, we tried to get Hamburger Mary's when they announced they were closing. We've worked with existing community businesses that were interested in partnering up and doing like a brewery and events and like kind of performance space. We've looked at other redevelopment. The most recent was also like a brewery pub type space. We have heard from community members, most definitely, that something like the commercial use that had been there would be like the top preference, right? Top preference. But in the 6 years I've been in office, and then granted, some of it was pandemic years and nobody was doing anything, but we have had multiple spaces. JB Alberto's wanted it, right? JB Alberto's was ready to purchase, had made an offer, and wanted to expand to a fast casual place. Of course, there was the cannabis dispensary that was interested, but we went through the process and I wasn't inclined to make that the use for it either. I know some people did support it because they thought some commercial use was better than none. But I'll say there have been offers on the table to this property owner, that have been dismissed. The most recent piece was a really fantastic idea, but because of the condition of the property that wasn't fully known to business owner who signed a lease, and he wasn't able to secure the finances. It was like more than $1 million in repairs to restore it. And he tried, but he couldn't get the funds, and so it didn't work out. So
So
just
this guy
say,
just sat on the property. I'm sorry to interrupt, but let's
yeah,
get this straight. This
yep,
guy just sat on the property
yep.
until it was valuable enough, even though it's a crap hole.
Yeah.
Actually, the guy's selling it for, I think, loss at this point.
Yeah, he's selling it for a loss. And I'll say, Darren, yes, it was really frustrating because we all knew, and like the neighborhood people knew, and everyone who talked to him knew, like, you're gonna lose on this. What he was asking was pretty unreasonable, for the selling price. And he just kind of he just kind of messed people around and was very difficult. And so it's been challenging. It's been challenging. So it's one of the reasons why, hey, here's a proposal we'll bring forward. But I've heard many proposals. We've tried to put pieces together. We've supported business applications for city grants. So there have been a lot of efforts from not just my office, but like I said, the Business Alliance and other folks to try and bring something to this space, just to let you know. We just don't talk about all of it.
Well, I'm sorry, we just don't talk about all of it. I mean, we're talking about it now. Seems like it should have been advertised that there was this sort of, these sort of options were on the table. I mean, the community would really get behind something like that. It
But that's
seems
not
like
it's not the community's decision, just to be clear. It's
completely understand, but
private property.
completely understand. But if we knew that all of these things were happening, especially the disrepair of the property, which, seems like, were there fines issued? Was this properly taken care of? This
Sure.
seems like,
Yep, it has
this.
been. So I'll answer that. And I know, Connie, you've put a few things in the chat there about an inspection. So, properties, have to maintain kind of safe conditions, but there are different standards for how a building is maintained for occupancy versus not for occupancy. So just to say, I don't know that we have any current building violations going on there. When there are kind of debris and things, sometimes it gets dirty over there. We do follow up on that, but it doesn't have an occupancy permit. Nobody can use it. I know for a while it was used as a campaign office. We followed that and had to, report that because it didn't have an occupancy agreement either. But that things get sometimes a little difficult when they're political. But just to say, they're yeah, the city's fine, and because there's no occupancy agreement, they're currently not in violation of anything by letting a property just rot. But Darren, I want to see if you have any direct questions for the development team before I move on.
I just want to make sure that there is going to be the utmost care for safety. I don't want, I know, I don't really like losing my Eastern light to this building, but I mean, if it any reason it's going to happen, I want to know that the proper right-of-way permits are going to be secured. There's going to be, every step, because this is, how we get to the beach. It's how everybody gets to the beach.
Yeah, of course, there would definitely be permits in place before we start any construction activities there. Um, and just about your comments on Loyola Housing, we're not affiliated in any way with Loyola. Uh, Again, the name of the building was something we tried to tie to the local environment. And that's why we put it up on the slide here, where you can give us your feedback. This was our thoughts, and we're open to hear your thoughts. But yes, we're not affiliated with Loyola in any way.
Yeah. Thank you.
So this could be occupied exclusively by Loyola students,
So Darren,
with the exception of the
because of federal
affordable.
housing laws, we can't discriminate against who occupies what space.
Sure.
But the thing you should pay attention to is, okay, if Loyola is expanding and there are going to be more students coming there, what's going to happen is those students are going to need housing, and what's going to happen is the demand is going to go up for housing in the immediate area of Loyola, driving the prices of existing housing up. So the way to solve that is actually build more housing, right? That's one of the ways that you could solve that, because you're not going to stop the students from coming there, right? You're not going to relocate Loyola to somewhere else. So if those students are going to come and they're going to be pushing out residents of that area. So the best thing we can do is increase the amount of stock available so that whether it's a Loyola student or a family, they have access to more options.
Yeah. Thanks, Sal, and thank you, Darren. I'm going to move on to Donald Brenner.
Hi, I live literally catty corner from the lot that you're talking about. I'm glad to see that people are trying to find things to go into to replace Leona's because unfortunately it has deteriorated to just an eyesore that we walk past or drive past that pretty much every day. It's at the entrance to our block. Our block, dead ends into the park. Um, and so what's on that corner kind of sets the whole tone for everything else in the block. Um, and the building that you're proposing, and I know you're saying that we can't take too much from the artist's rendering, although it's a little unfair to us to make choices without actually seeing what's going to be there, is just really big and really bulky. When you put in 80 units on our corner, I don't think there are 80 units on the rest of the block. I might be wrong about that, but I can't imagine there are 80 units on this entire block. Um, and I know that you're saying that people are only using 25% or 50% of parking that you would think, right? If there are 80 units, um, I would imagine there would be, 80 cars or 160 cars, but maybe I'm completely messed up about that. But that's going to put, we have very little parking on this block to begin with in the summer when people want to come here to enjoy our beach, which is, certainly a fine thing for them to do. It gets really, really hard to park on the street. And I know, we've tried to do some things with that with getting, the neighborhood parking permits so that people that aren't from the neighborhood can't move in and take all the parking spaces, and that's kind of nice. But um, the 6 stories and the bulk and the density of it is just really out of character for this whole neighborhood and for the block. There's nothing else around here. Yeah, you can point to several other places of comparable height throughout Rogers Park, but around here there really isn't anything over 3 stories. Um, and if you want to talk about the building that's between Sheridan and the CTA station on the south side, um, that's a great example of horrible architecture that isolates it completely from the community and has a real prison kind of feel to it. I would certainly hope that you don't want to replicate that here on our corner. So I guess I didn't really ask any questions, but I did have that I wanted to say.
This is the space for feedback and sharing your opinions, Donald. So I think that's helpful, and I appreciate that. Next up
Thank
is
you for
Keith
that.
Lord. And Keith, you're muted if you are trying to talk. All right, Keith might have stepped away. We'll come back. Val Zillig.
Oh, wait, I'm muted. I'm
You're there.
unmuted. I'm
You got it?
unmuted.
All right, Keith.
I got it. I
You're
got
up.
it. Again, I'm going to say, Alderman, first of all, thank you for your time. And I have been reading and following along, and a lot of good sites or a lot of good points have been made. I own 2 single-family homes on the end of the Morse Avenue block. Our office is on the 1225 West Morse Avenue. And Gina Crusoe and I have put in arguably 20 retail residents into the community. We are currently working on the Village Theater, the old Bulldog, and the old Tapas Place on Pratt, as well as the Starbucks and the Bank of America. So we're well familiar with the retail components. We have a huge investment on Morse Avenue. I think new development is good. I'm just going to be kind of quick. I think I would love to see a story come off of this and come down 1 story. And my major concern, and people have made it, is access to that alley. Right now, Sheridan Road and Morse Avenue is a very difficult turn coming off of Morse Avenue, and you add 40 to 45 more cars into that lit intersection, either coming in from work or going out in the morning to work, or one block south, and it's going to be almost impossible to get out of the east of Sheridan area. So I'm more in favor of less cars. I know that's probably controversial, and taking a story off of it. The key is not to destroy the alley. These cars are coming off the alley versus Sheridan Road, which they do now. And I think that alley is going to be very, very difficult. And yes, somebody mentioned that the stoplights at Sheridan and Morse Avenue are difficult and unsafe at this time. Other than that, I think development is good. I think the addition of low income and the bikes are good. These are good developers, but I'd shrink a floor off the building, and I would take some of the cars out to not screw up the alley.
Thanks a lot, Keith. Appreciate that constructive feedback. Are you you're with Flats?
No, I'm with the Lord Companies. The Lord Companies has been around for 40 years. We are known for retail on the bottom of multi-use buildings. Could you put a cafe or something on the corner and soften that? Yes. You've got a patio outside that would be great. Are there smaller cafes and smaller retail that would soften that corner as you're showing it right now? I think that would make it more palatable for the people on the block and Morse Avenue. And those tenants exist. We're getting a massive amount of tenant interest all along Rogers Park for all the wrong reasons. It's a lot of people that are trying to get out of the loop and trying to get out of River North. They see Rogers Park as a saving spot, a wonderful place, one of the last lakefront communities. And could you get a small retailer in there and soften that corner? Yeah, you can. There are plenty of retailers that would go around. It wouldn't have to be Starbucks, but it could be a Starbucks competitor.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Keith. Appreciate that.
Or a local place, Keith.
I know. I would still like to put in Simone Friedman, who was on Howard Street and did very well there. And then she started a chai tea company, and this thing just exploded. And she would potentially come back into the neighborhood, or somebody else that's already in the neighborhood. We have really good neighborhood tenants.
Yeah, we do. We have lots of good neighborhood businesses. Thanks, Keith.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay. Val, you're up.
Hey, thank you for the presentation. Just to let you know, I live on Farwell behind the on the block behind here. Generally, I'm pretty supportive of this. I think the design needs some work. I think the scale and the bulk actually isn't that bad. There's plenty of those 5-story 3+1 apartments in the area. And I also don't think that we should be poo-pooing students moving in the area. Everybody's part of the community. So I guess I just have my main comment is, come back with a really cool design, with a really great design next time around. I know that, I'm an urban planner, and I know that sometimes you just put something out there to get people's opinion right away, but really put some effort into it next time, if this is moving along. And I agree with Keith on the alley behind there, because I do use that alley as well. My only other question is, you said this is going to be owned by a private equity company. Do you know who the owners of that private equity company are?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier Chicago F9 Equity Partners.
Yes, but who are the people's names who are behind that?
We would have to. That's, I think, over my pay grade.
Could we get that information?
Absolutely, we can work on it.
I think it's important that, we have people who are not, don't have fines, business fines, that type of stuff, or have a history of screwing up.
The city actually requires before any permits are issued.
Yeah, there's a
City,
disclosure.
yeah.
There's a disclosure there, and I'll say, Val, one of the things too through the lakefront protection application is also a slavery profit disclosure as well for all owners.
Yeah. But generally, it'd be great to see something done at that site.
Yeah,
So,
thanks.
Generally supportive.
Thank you.
Thanks, Val. Jane, you're up next.
Sorry, I had to get my audio. Yeah, so yeah, I really appreciate everybody's thoughtful comments here. And we too live on the block east of Sheridan on Morse Avenue. I've lived here for almost 40 years. Um, and I support the project. I think the opportunity for housing for affordable and market is a good thing for the community. I would like to see it. I agree with for it to be lower by a floor or two. And of course, we all support you know, a design that fits into the community that will be
Wow.
attractive. And yes, Keith, we are. um, uh, so I really appreciate this has been sitting there for a very long time, and all the efforts that the alderwoman has put in. You've worked very hard and very much appreciate that, and very much appreciate you guys for listening to us, to all of us here. So I think this is a strong community, and we want whatever comes in. It's a corner that needs to be used well. And for the housing is important, and the parking is important for for people in the community. So that whatever the ratio is to have enough parking for new residents so that it doesn't um, um, increase the competition of parking that already exists, but at the same time deals with some of the issues I think that Keith was raising on with the alley are well taken. So basically, though, I want to we are feel supportive of good use and for housing to come to the
Thank you
spot.
so much for your feedback, Jane. And regarding the parking ratios, I think based on this information, we're sort of above the use, statistically at least. Um, what we're proposing, like the ratio, which is close to 1 to 2, is as you can see here from the Center of Neighborhood Technology, the actual use of parking in these TOD areas is actually a lot less than 0.5. So, but thank you for your support.
Thanks, Jean. All right, next up, just a quick note in the chat. I know a few people joined late. Can we refrain from name calling? Would appreciate that. No name calling in the chat. All right. And David, you're up next.
Is that David Moskowitz or is there another David?
No, oh, sorry, David Anguinaldo.
Hi, everybody. My name is David Aguinaldo. I live at 1237 West Barwell, so just 1 block away from the proposed building. Like many other people on the call today, I regularly walk past the abandoned Leonas on the way to the lakefront to enjoy the lake. And I also agree with what a lot of people have been saying about that intersection. And I think that this is a good opportunity for you all as investors, developers, and the alderwoman as well, to work together to find ways to rejuvenate and make that intersection safer. We've got a lot of options that we can do there. We could upgrade the bus stops. There are so many bus stops on that corner. So it's direct access to the 147 bus downtown. It's direct access to the Devon bus, the local Sheridan bus. You know, you're 2 blocks away from the Red Line. We are in transit paradise up here. We have so many options to get around. And so I think that really showing that in that intersection and making this building very clear that it's transit oriented, I think is something that can go a long way. That being said, I'm going to be of a smaller opinion here, but I do believe that there's actually more parking spaces than I think necessarily that we need. especially if we're talking about people who are there to live by transit. I've heard some other speakers. Viral was talking earlier today about how this is a great, I moved here because this is a great neighborhood for queer people, for young people, people who don't necessarily drive. Um, and I think that bringing in this many units into our neighborhood is going to help develop more foot traffic on Sheridan, all of these things. I think that it's really important. But my number one priority would be redesigning that intersection, make it safe for our pedestrians, for our bus riders, for our train riders, and not just accessible for those people, but accessible for all of the people in our neighborhood who have physical disabilities, who struggle to get over to the lake, and who deserve to get over to the lake. So we need to be very, very serious about making sure that this intersection becomes a much, much safer place for everybody. And we can do that, and we can have 80 units in the building. Another couple of things, just quickly, more accessible units are so welcome in the neighborhood. You mentioned, you know, financially accessible, but we also need to have physically accessible spaces as well. So I don't know if these are all going to be, you know, ADA compliant as far as like entrances, all of that.
Yes, sir.
Great.
Yeah, and then it's an elevator building, so all the units are accessible in terms of at least getting to the levels, even if they're not fully ADA accessible in terms of like bathrooms and cabinetry and things like that.
Would they all be convertible though? I know there's
Uh,
different.
yeah, I think I believe the number is like 20% are fully ADA, 10 to 20% are fully ADA compliant, and then the rest of the units are type B units, which is less
But they could be made, the type B
it
is
could be
the
made very
doorways and
easy.
things are wide enough. And with a conversion of maybe counter heights, they could be made fully accessible.
Exactly.
That's great. Because it's so hard to add that accessibility to our older building stock. So having newer building stock is going to give a lot more accessibility to our neighbors. There is a desperate need already for accessible housing for people with physical disabilities. So let's make sure that that's really put front and center, especially because of the proximity to the buses and public transport that many people with physical disabilities rely on. Two final things. The name, scratch the name. The name's not good. The bell, I think we've all said, like, we think of ourselves as Rogers Parkers, not Loyola neighborhood adjacent. Like, that's just not what we think of ourselves as. One suggestion I could bring up is Vivian Meyer, the famous street photographer who lived in Rogers Park for a time, or just talked with the Rogers Park Historical Society. Let's see who we can bring into this space that's going to really make people feel connected to our neighborhood that we love. And then the final thing is retail space, ice cream shop, close to the lakefront, close to the beach. I think it would be fun. Anybody else want an ice cream shop? Anyways,
That's a great idea, David. We love it.
Sold.
We love that. And that's the idea, like, you know, we want to hear this feedback. And I appreciate all the thoughtfulness that you put into everything you just mentioned there, David. I love the idea of the name as well. Would love to name a building. Yeah, Vivian Meyer. And we're open to suggestions.
Oh, thanks, David. All right, Catherine Olivan.
Hi. Thanks to everybody for finally negotiating with the owner. He's had a long history of saying no or changing his mind. So you did something right. Congratulations for getting this far. I agree with a lot of what people say. I'd like to see the density commensurate with what's east of Sheridan Road. I would love to see a floor come off the top. But that's lower profit. I understand that. I want to speak specifically to the parking. You have your ratios, and that's typical, but there's a bigger picture of parking in this neighborhood. Most of the businesses that have gone out of business, like Twisted Tapas down on Pratt and across the street, went out of business because they didn't have enough parking to support dinner people who want to come and be, to Rogers Park, have an evening out. We just don't have enough parking to support businesses. Leona's had a parking lot that worked for them. So I like the idea if you want to put in a coffee shop or an eatery that you would include parking for them. But I would also think about increasing the parking ratio, not just thinking about the people you would be renting to. It's all rental, is that correct? Did I understand that? Yeah. Um, we pay a lot of money in this neighborhood because we to pay to people who rent out their spaces up to 300 a month just for parking for one car because there isn't enough parking. So you could create a revenue source, take off a floor, put in some more parking spaces. They're easier to maintain than toilets. And you could create a revenue source. We also are impacted by people who drive to the lakefront in the summer and they come loaded with cars. They come with their coolers and their kids and their tents and their barbecues and their charcoal and their bikes and their games. And they're going to drive. I don't care. You're not going to do that on public transportation. So it would be really beneficial to the neighborhood and the people we like to attract to the wonderful lakefront to have additional parking. So you could maybe go back to the drawing board and see how you can make some money off of parking. Now, to the people who are afraid of the traffic that brings, I am too. I live east of Sheridan, and one of my least favorite moments is coming home from Trader Joe's or Whole Foods in Evanston and having to turn left onto Morse or Farwell Avenue, southbound on Sheridan. We could really use some left turn signals. And if this project goes in, I can't imagine the city would give you a permit without a left turn signal to make that turn safer.
I agree with you, and that's something we would be doing once we get further down along the process, is working with Department of Transportation to figure out the best way to make this happen.
Yeah, but it's to have something that lends attractiveness to the neighborhood, is in character with the neighborhood. You've had a lot of good input, green space on the roof, affordable housing, and a nice coffee shop or maybe more would be better than an empty Leona's lot that is got a cracking. All those unused parking spaces drive me nuts.
Yeah. Imagine. Thanks a lot, Catherine, for your input.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you.
Carol, you're up next.
Hi, Maria. My name is Carol Reichel. I have lived in Rogers Park for almost 50 years. I was sorry to see Leona's go. I kind of missed having a restaurant on that corner, but it's been a big empty lot, and I mean a big empty lot for a long time. So I want to say I welcome this development. I think it's going to be a big improvement over this big empty lot. I have one question. Okay, it was stated that the developers that they weren't going to be using, they were going to be using all private funds and no public funds. But however, because of the zoning change that they asked for, they have to have the 20% set aside. So I imagine that Sal and Mike or the developer, that you will be subsidizing the 20% yourself and not receiving the public funds. I always assumed that when there were subsidized housing, that they were receiving public funds. I don't know, maybe using the private money is common, but I was just
Carol,
wondering.
you
Yes.
are correct. I just want to answer this while you're talking about it. So generally, in a lot of affordable housing projects, the funding is coming through federal funds, through state funds, and local city monies. We're not using any of that. So when we say that those units are going to be price locked, that is the developer. It's coming out of developer and the owner's pocket. It is not. It is not in any way funded by any public dollars.
Okay, so where is the accountability?
There's an agreement that is entered into with the
Covenant
city.
for the city. It has to be affordable for 30 years.
Right.
For 30 years. Okay. All right. Thank you.
No,
Thank you,
good
Carol.
questions, Carol. Jeffrey.
Hey, is that me?
Yeah, it's you.
Oh,
Hey, Jeff.
okay. Sorry. Long time listener, first time Zoom caller. Anyhow, I live directly across the street on Sheridan, and I agree with a lot of the people as far as taking it down one step. I mean, it is a lot of units, but I think some people are using the math about how many units. Even if you had 180 units there, if you just count all those multi-unit buildings on Sheridan going one or two blocks and then going in and out, there's thousands of units really when you get down to it. And well, but my fear when I first saw the drawing is that it looks kind of like that building at Morse and Morrison Morrison Wayne. That it's just that horrible building. It just looks like an insular, like something's going on in there, but nobody's welcome to go in there or whatever. It's just something ugly. And I'd like to see. I believe it was Mr. Lord said something about with the cafe. You should definitely have some kind of a retail there. And I know if you look a block or two away, you'll see some empty stores, and there has been some attempts. And Starbucks moved a couple blocks south because they could be closer to Loyola. But there's definitely the business. From a pedestrian standpoint, people are walking constantly, year round, up and down and across on Morse all the time. There's 3 bus stops there, and there's nothing close. The closest coffee shop I have is what is that one over on it's over Greenview. Got to walk all the way down and got limited hours, and most of the time it's packed. You know, I'm an artist. I like to draw when I drink my coffee in a shop, and it's just, there's never any space. I mean, it's a high dense area, and if you look at that building, you build it big blocky building, and it's just there, and there's nothing. You know, it was retail before. It worked as retail. It doesn't have to be a big operation. It can just be a small cafe, coffee shop, something like that. Just could be a third space for the community, somewhere for us to meet our neighbors. I grew up in Uptown, not too far from here, but I've lived in the neighborhood for about 3.5 years now. Although I'm very familiar. I lived here before 20 years ago when I was young, like the Loyola students. But anyway, it just seems like I lost my train of thought there. It just seems like a cafe there would be perfect. But if you just leave it cold and black, all we're going to see is the traffic. And it should be. I think one of the gentlemen used it soft in the corner. That makes perfect sense. And I guess a direct question I have is, what are you thinking about the rents that they're going to charge there? Because that has more to say about who's going to show up and live there and who isn't. Because the higher the rent is, then the more likely it is it's going to be 3 Loyola students, you know, like 3 trust fund kids or something like that. Just get an apartment, and that's usually what happens, you know, with 2 or 3. Or if you go into the small little micro units, you know, those are terrible too. So I understand 2 bedrooms are good, but I was wondering what your price range was. And I mean, also, I'm happy that you're doing the affordable housing. That makes sense. I'm glad you're not. I know that the option is there for the investors to pay out of that, and a lot of them did that, and they did a lot of that in Uptown, almost every single time. And it's good to see a developer just going along with the agreement as it's supposed to, as in the spirit of the law, right? That to
Sure.
see after. So yeah, so I guess my one direct question is, what is your range of rents expected? I know you can't say too much now, and I don't want to comment too much on the building with the style because, like you said, you're going to change, and I know renderings change a lot. And I'm really happy to hear that you're open to the idea of a cafe. But that's about it for now.
Thanks a lot, Jeffrey. Regarding the rents, it would really depend on what we end up building. The higher the density is, the lower the overall cost of the rent would be per unit. So if because of the cost of land and construction, the more we build, just unit economics, they turn out better, and so we're able to offer better rents. Um, and so yeah, we don't really know at this point until we have a solid um, plan in place about what is going to be allowed for us to build there. But density, the more density there is, just as a general rule of thumb, the cheaper the rent would be.
Okay, well, I got that, but so you have no idea how much you would charge? Like a 1 bedroom would say like 2,000, 2,200. I mean,
I
there's
don't have,
there's a
so
pretty
if
set range. I mean, people go out looking for a building, for an apartment. They kind of know what they're going to spend, and they know what's out there. And you know what's out there because you're in the real estate business. So I'm sure you know better than some random artist on a Zoom call, you know?
sure.
So
So Jeffrey,
if you could just guess to me, if you could just guess right now, what
yeah,
would you say the number as a ballpark
we would
for
like to
where you are
keep
now?
rents as affordable as possible. Um, and so our previous project when we had underwrote the deal back then, depending on construction costs, if the cost goes up, that the cost of debt goes up, the cost of building materials goes up. There's no way to make make up that cost increase without getting rents for it. So it really depends. But in our last analysis, which was about a year ago, we were able to maintain, based on that project, rents around starting at $1,500. Um, so it's pretty, I think, comparable with market rents. And even if it was built, the rents would be in line with existing housing stock. It may not be the cheapest from the existing housing stock, but it would be in line with the current market at the time that it's completed.
Okay, so one quick follow-up question. What would convince you to put a cafe there? Is like, what do you think is what do you need to make you decide on putting a small cafe in that red zone area?
Yeah, we're here. That's why we're here to get feedback. We didn't know if retail was something that the community wanted or didn't want. And so that's why we're kind of throwing out our ideas, and we're listening. We're waiting to listen for feedback. It seems like for the majority of what we've heard, the community is welcome of a cafe, and so we'd be happy to do something like that.
Yeah. And I think it'd be okay. And Starbucks has like 3 units on Sheridan Road within four or five blocks there already. God forbid you have another Starbucks, no more Starbucks. But there are a lot of local operators that can.
We love the idea of bringing in a local, small, as I mentioned in the beginning, a regional or a local operator.
Yeah, is there something you could do to get in front of it too? To purpose built. You see, the thing with all these other little storefronts that are nearby, especially on that side of Sheridan, is they have no ADA compliance. They got like one little crappy bathroom or something, or they just have problems. But if you could purpose built it, if you could just talk to one of these people and
Yeah,
purpose
absolutely.
build
What we would do is,
it would make a humongous difference, and it's something that people could see. And also, with the traffic and everything like that, that's something that the city and everybody else, that's kind of on the whole community to fix that problem with all the accidents and the traffic. But there's a lot of barriers for that, and I'm sure Maria knows all about that. Sheridan Road isn't just some other road that we can just do what we want. We can't put new bump outs. We can't do this. We can't do that. So I don't know. And I was wondering, like, are you guys going to be responsible for any traffic modifications? Like if there was like a southbound left-hand turn lane
We
or
we
some
could part of I'll answer, and I want to answer a couple questions of things you brought up, Jeffrey, too, because these are good points. Um, they're not technically responsible. That could be something that we talk about, though, right? Like it could be,
Yeah.
hey, we get a traffic study, we talk to DPD, hey, maybe they chip in on, some infrastructure kind of pieces. So that it could be a discussion, right, that we talk about with them should this proceed. I also want to mention that on the ARO piece, and this is not to detract from their proposal, but we actually am very proud to say we get to co-sponsor. We changed the laws a couple of years ago to prevent buyouts. So
Oh,
nobody
you
can.
did? I
Oh
didn't
yeah.
know that. Okay.
Oh yeah. We
Good, 'cause
changed the law.
that was an
Like,
evil loophole.
yep. We
It
took
really
away
was.
that loophole and
Oh,
increased it from a 10% minimum to a 20% minimum.
beautiful,
Oh,
beautiful.
yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, that sounds good. And I don't want to take up a lot more time. So yeah, I appreciate the affordable, and especially like another gentleman mentioned the accessible housing, and that is an extremely critical need. And it would just be nice to have people that could live in an accessible apartment in a place like that, where they could go out their door to the lake or downtown. I mean, that's oriented development as far as I'm concerned, transportation to people who need it the most. You know, so I applaud you for that. So thank you very much, and good luck with the project. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Thanks for being a first-time Zoom commenter.
I'm not much of a Zoomer, but I try. But thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Al Goldberg, you're up.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Maria, for hosting the meeting, and thank you to the developers for coming up with an interesting project. I've got some comments and maybe a question or two, but one, I empathize with all of the other commenters who live in proximity to this project and have concerns about all the issues that were presented because yeah, I too have concerns when there's construction proposed near where I am, and those are things that need to be taken into account. And I like the idea of the traffic signal on Morris Avenue. I think that would be helpful in that location. Because my opinion regarding the traffic is, I think the traffic from the apartment building um, is probably less of a problem than if there was a busy restaurant there, especially when there was Leona's with pizza and delivery drivers and there was and so forth, or some of the other proposals. There would be, um, there's a lot of come and go traffic where people are staying for shorter amount of times and exiting, entering and exiting at the intersection. Regarding the design, I've seen a lot of new construction buildings, and I kind of like this design with the vertical elements and the setbacks because it's really not a box. I really have a problems with a lot of new construction that are primarily boxes, and I think the vertical elements add um, something to the visual. I mean, it's always going to look like a new building. It's not going to look like 100-year-old courtyard building, but you know. But I got to say that the ground floor needs some attention. I would probably, figure out something more creative on the ground floor. Have some art, get some artwork involved, some mosaics involved, some integrated greenery on the facade of the building, something to make the corner more attractive. And I like the idea of the corridor, which you can't see from the outside. It's in the back, but it adds a lot of light to all those apartments and makes them more livable spaces with all of the additional window space. Um, and regarding the mixed income housing, I'm I'm a strong proponent of mixed income housing. So when you mix affordable income tenancies with market rate tenancies, it's a win-win. It's a benefit for the living situation for the people occupying the affordable and low income units to be living in a mixed income community. And there's a lot of studies that it's more beneficial than living in 100% um, low income affordable buildings. So, and I'm glad you're keeping the units on site. I guess you have to keep them on site now, but in the past, so much opportunity was lost when people were able to buy out of putting in those um, affordable units in a building. Um, my I guess my only question is regarding the 40 some parking spaces. Does that number 40, does that include the parking in the accessory parking lot in the alley, or is the accessory parking lot in the alley um, additional to the 40 parking units? So with that, good luck on the project.
Thanks a lot, Al. Regarding your question about parking, um, the way that we have it drawn currently at the ground floor, we have 35 spaces, but it's sort of um, a balance that we need to strike after this community meeting and feedback that we received from the community about the lot in the back and the cafe. So if we want some green space in that lot in the back, then we'll have to lose some spaces. If we're doing the cafe, then we'll lose a couple of spaces in there. But the idea and objective is that at minimum we would have those 42 units, 42 parking spaces at minimum. And it probably will end up being more.
So the accessory lot is all of the 40 units are included in some way or other in that.
Yes.
That's an essential part of the parking.
Absolutely. The way that we've drawn it with a little bit of green space, we could do that if the community is not really interested in the green space being placed over there because of it being in an alley, we could secure a few more parking spaces there as well.
Thanks, Al.
Okay, yeah, I'm finished, so you can take me out of here.
And we'll
Thank you very
take you
much,
out
Al.
of the queue. Thanks, Al. All right. I've got Susan, and then we had somebody whose phone died and dropped out. And so, Linda, you'll be after Susan. And I know that'll be from, I think, Donald's phone. So, Susan, you're up.
Okay, thank you. So I'm glad to hear that numerous people would like to see floor 2 taken off and they feel that it's too dense. I agree with that. And I agree with that uh, because it's in the lakefront protection zone. So that is an area that has been zoned low rise. And we did that after we saw what happened in Edgewater with the high-rise canyon that developed on their lakefront. We instituted zoning so that we could keep our lakefront low-rise, and that is what makes our neighborhood not just unique in the city, but unique in the world, is that we have this urban, approachable lakefront. The zone, if people don't know, includes both sides of Sheridan Road to the water's edge. That is zoned low rise. And because of that, there's light, there's air, there's a lake breeze. You can see a patch of blue at the end of the street. You can see a seagull. It's a very wonderful experience and very special. So I would want to see something in keeping with that type of zoning. I think that we will need density and affordable housing, accessible housing going forward. But I think there are other lots in the neighborhood that could be utilized for that. I think going forward, as our density and our population increases, we are going to need that lakefront zone more than ever. We're going to need a place where we can go and refresh ourselves, see some light, some air, some nature. Also, because of the low-rise zoning, we still have many beautiful vintage buildings there in the lakefront protection zone. So I would say my first choice, like you said, would be to have a brewery and keep it a nice neighborhood building that we can walk to. But if not that, then I would say something that's in keeping with our zoning, take a story or 2 off, not make it as dense. Part of the reason why the lakefront zone is meant to be lower density is because the more dense you make the lakefront, the harder it is for the public to access the lakefront. The more dangerous it is for them to get to the beach, more difficult it is. So those are all the reasons to keep the lakefront less dense. I think that we developers have been wanting to make it more dense and develop it, and I think that we have to stand firm as a community and tell developers what we want and to abide by the law. And I don't think we should rely on the city plan commission to do that for us. A lot of those things happen behind closed doors without notice. So I agree with the other folks about taking off a floor or 2. The zone is supposed to be 4 stories or less. Regarding the building, I agree with other people. The windows are too small. It looks like a prison. When you have that density of units, a lot of times you get units that have maybe only one window, or two windows, or you're looking at your neighbor 10 feet across. They're not very nice units. And also the sidewalk, there's a brick wall in your face and it's not pedestrian friendly or walkable.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for the comments. There's a couple things I want to clarify, and also I'll take some questions from the chat there. Patrick, are you trying to raise your hand? When I see you raising your hand, I'll make sure to add you to the stack. Sorry, I just noticed you raising your hand. I'll call you after a couple of folks, and thank you. I'll make sure to call you to get your question asked. So the current zoning, I think some people, Mike and Sal, could you guys go back to the slide that lists kind of the current zoning and the proposed zoning? So I believe the current zoning here is B31. It's not that one. There you go. Current zoning is B31. The proposed zoning is actually B25. And so would you guys speak a little bit to why that change? This changes from like a community shopping district, B31, to a neighborhood mixed use district. Would you guys speak a little bit to why you need the change for that?
Well, the increase from a B31 to a B25 or whatever, that allows more units per area of lot. So as the second number increases, the zoning allows you to just add more units, divide the lot by a special number that's designated to that zoning, and that special number gives you the number of units you're allowed to do. It also increases, the higher the number, the more it increases your buildable area as well as your height. So a -5 has I forget what it is, I think it's 5.0 multiplier. So you take your lot area, multiply it by 5.0, and that's how big you could build. You don't have to use all that square footage versus a -1, which I think is a 1.2 multiplier. It allows you, I don't know, like maybe 30,000 square feet to build. So essentially, it makes the building larger with more units. The lower the number, less units, smaller building. The setbacks on both are the same. So the current zoning, you could build to the property line all the way around, except for the rear property line. There's a 30-foot requirement to residential from your rear property line. But you could go 0 setbacks on the side, 0 setbacks on the front. The height, so that's the same for all B zonings and C zonings. The height does increase in a -5. It does allow you to do 6 stories. I believe the -1 allows you to do 3 or 4 stories.
4 stories.
So there's not much difference in height between a -5 and a 3 stories or so. So that's the gist of it. There's a lot more into it than that, but that's the bulk in the area.
Yeah, and then I'll also touch on from a developer perspective. The issue is for whatever reason, or when Ted bought the property, the current owner maybe overpaid or whatever it is. The numbers don't pencil out. So we do retail development as well. And it all comes down to sort of the acquisition price and cost of construction to be able to bring a retailer there that can pay the rents. And with everything that's happening in terms of construction costs rising and taxes going up in Cook County, bringing a retailer at that price point would be nearly impossible, if not very, very highly unlikely. So that's just the sort of the reason why, as people that do retail development as well, why we're not able to use this site for retail purpose. It just doesn't pencil out for any of the retailers. And we've talked to a number of retailers about that site. But with the cost of the land acquisition and cost of construction, they're not able to afford the rents that would be required to cover just principal and interest. Forget about anything over that principal and interest. So that's just some like financial issues that come into like feasibility of the lot. And so the only way to really make this work is to is the highest and best use of it is just to go vertical, and put in enough units so that the cost per unit is allows for market rate rents to support the principal and interest.
Yeah, so thank you guys for that. A couple other things before we go to the next questioner. I know some folks were asking, hey, is this the same developer with the proposal that was made on Juneway in Sheridan? Yes. So some folks were like, hey, some of these renderings look similar. So same group, different proposal. So just to clarify that, because there's not a secret, guys. They're interested in developing in Rogers Park. So, and this may not be the last proposal from them, from other sites as well. Other things, just to grab it from the chat here as we move forward. Again, folks can be a little chill to each other. Connell wants to know why the flyer says RT4. There could have been a mistake on the flyer. If so, apologies, guys. It's currently B31, as you could see if you look at the zoning map or in the presentation. Okay. So now,
Maria, can I clarify something really quick too?
Okay, if it needs to be clarified.
I just wanted to, so we were talking about the lakefront protection zone. I just wanted to make sure everyone's clear that there is no height requirement in the lakefront protection zone, and that it extends not just in Rogers Park, it extends down the entire lakefront for the whole city. So just so everyone's clear.
Yeah. Thanks, Kyle. All right, I think we've got Linda under Donald's account. Linda. And you'll have to unmute Linda. All right, Linda, we will come back to you. Jim.
My phone is misbehaving.
Oh, there we go. Linda, you there?
Yeah, by the way, my phone is misbehaving. Thank you for having this meeting. I really appreciate what we're talking about, what the neighborhood's going to look like. And I think that the part about Chicago that's so wonderful is that that lakefront is pretty special. And I know that this is a great approach. I live catty corner across the street from the proposed new building. And what I would be looking for is long-lasting design. You know, all the things that we build right now, what will they look like in 20 years? Do they have that staying power? And what I've seen, first of all, with the local ones that have been built in the past few years, is the one that's catty corner from Alberto's, has those ventilator units as its ground floor. It is so unfriendly. It is so non-Rogers Park. It doesn't create community. It creates parking. And I understand the need for parking, but it shouldn't supersede the need of creating community and providing spaces for people. These are all zero lot line designs from what I can see on my little phone. And now this is going to go to sleep. Okay, so we're gonna probably run out of power here all over the place, but I'm very concerned about the ground floor parking. I think it's not something that's a good entryway to the beautiful parks that we have here. I have concerns about the height. I think it's too tall. It should be more in keeping with what we have already, which would be about 4 stories. I'm also concerned about what kind of lighting would be around this new structure, what you guys see as a way to how you're going to light the building, basically. And I really do like the interior courtyard. I think that that's a nice plus for any kind of building that's going on right now. A little extra green space is very useful. And so I did want to say that I think it's just too high. I think that the first floor parking is not a good use of space. And talking about the dog park down the alley, you know, those alleys are just filled with garbage trucks constantly. When I used to run and you'd run down there, it wasn't a particularly wonderful place to be wandering. And if that extra piece of parking was going to be turned into something, perhaps that could supplant the parking that you want to put on the ground floor. I think that in terms of design, I think one of the worst things I've seen in design on Sheridan is the structure that was built by the Target with those tiny little windows. We do have climate change. People needed the opportunity to not have to pay for electricity to cool down their apartments. I think windows that open much more widely than those would be a great idea. And if you're building a Juneway and Sheridan, I hope that you have the same ideas about traffic um, down there as well, because if you live on this side of Sheridan, getting into our part of the street is you wait and wait and wait and wait and wait. I don't know if that means more turning lanes or someone enforcing the fact that people need to stop when there's a red light. But that's a real concern, being able to get in and out of here. And so in terms of what it looks like, I'd like it to be a much more friendly and either more classical or more modern, one way or the other, not this kind of you know, barely acceptable look. And make it somewhat friendly. And in terms of whatever business you want to put in there, I'd like to know what kind of square footage we're talking about for the business, and would it face Sheridan or would it face Morse? And what kind of interest have you had from any kind of local shops that want to go there? I kind of pulled my notes over from the side, so I'm looking real quick, but I think those are my questions right now. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you very much. I'll answer the last question that I can answer. The retail space, we haven't exactly determined that yet. This was a conversation we're having. And then accordingly, we can go back to the drawing board. It seems like everyone does want retail there. And so we can go back to the drawing board and figure out the most efficient space, and then come back with that. Regarding the parking in the back or the grass area, the same thing, here to get this feedback and then come back to the table with an updated design. And that's it.
Yeah, and thank you for the feedback, Linda. And I'll remind folks too, especially as you're taking notes, we're taking notes. We've got a recording of this, and then there's also going to be the community survey, where we really do take the feedback, right? And see what we can do to see if this is a project that'll work, or we can come up with a good version of this project that'll kind of meet our housing needs and some of the community concerns. So thank you for that. Jim, you're up. And then Patrick, I've got you.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks for hosting, and thanks for the excellent presentation, gentlemen. Uh, I think the traffic stuff, first of all, is legit, and we need arrows up and down Sheridan anyway. And I don't think you guys are going to be able to do anything about that. But I do think that's a very real concern. There's a study years ago. There's something like 45,000 cars a day that come up and down Sheridan Road. So, I mean, this is a drop in the bucket. But the real issue is the lack of traffic control devices along the path from Devon all the way up to Evanston. So if we can get those, I think that would help. And that's obviously going to be beyond the scope of this. I do think that a cafe is a great idea. I think the key piece of that, though, has to be the price point. If you go, like some of these others have done here, and I think Keith Lord could probably speak to this pretty well. In a lot of these spaces, they're asking a hell of a lot of money for those spaces. $4,000 or $5,000 a month for a 600 square foot space. You've got to sell a lot of cups of coffee to make that rent. And if you're looking at a situation as most restaurants do, where you're supposed to have maybe 8% of your revenue is going out for your rent, you do the math, it very quickly becomes very difficult for anybody to make that space work. So, I would say just build it very intentionally with that in mind. The rest of it, I'll just say, as far as like housing in this community, we desperately need housing. This country desperately needs housing. We're in the middle of a housing crisis. So however it gets done, build something with some housing. That would be great. I think we desperately need that. A gentleman talked earlier about folks wanting to come to this very progressive community. And I think that's real. And I would like to see that happen. So as much as possible, let's get some good units in there. The prison analogy I think is crazy. Have you ever seen a prison? I mean, I'm sorry, I got to say it. This doesn't look anything like a prison, but it could look a little better. And it sounds like y'all are willing to work on that. And that's what I think would be great. My final point won't make me any friends. Well, there's two. The first is that green space in the back. Whatever happens there, I really don't think it can be left as like a little parklet, unsupervised. Because in this community, what we've seen is when that happens, it's very hard to kind of manage what's going on in that space. Because it very quickly becomes a haven for undesirable activity. So whatever we do there, it has to be something that is, really organically tied to the community, whether it's a dog park or, a children's play lot or whatever it is. And in addition to that, the management company for the building has to also be responsible for managing that place. It cannot just be abandoned because it'll just be a mess. And then finally, Alderwoman, I would say, it's really great. Every study, they've done about zoning laws in America keeps coming back to this thing of hyper-local control of decision making a lot of times makes it so things don't happen. So I think it's really great that we're soliciting community input, and we need to do that. But there is also a tendency of folks who are going to see things kind of change close to them to say, no, I don't want that. And I would hope that, we find a way to build as much housing as we can, despite the fact that, some folks are going to say, hey, I just don't like it because my world's going to be a little bit different. For me personally, I'm not going to tell somebody who needs a place to live, hey, I don't want to have to circle the block another time to find a parking space. So you got to just go somewhere else. I think those at this point in the city and in this country, those really are the choices we're looking at. And, it's hard, but, I don't think we can just veto things. As we've seen, it happens all the time in this city and across the country, just because it's going to make our lives a little different. It'll be an adjustment for sure. More people always is. But I think that's something that we can do with the idea that we're growing our community. I think that's a good thing if we can find a way to do it, non-excessively. That's it.
Jim, thank you very much for that constructive feedback. We really appreciate it. And like we've touched on it many times about the rendering preliminary. This is not like this. There's a much cheaper way to build these buildings, which is what some of the stuff that you've seen in the ward, newer buildings, which are hardy panel, just paneled stuff. Brick is a lot more expensive, and we're trying to do that so that we can bring some character to it and hope to improve that with feedback.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Patrick. And just because I had a couple questions, you guys, it's Patrick, and then Jonathan, Nancy, Ireti, Tom, David, Courtney, and Nicole. So Patrick, you're up. But you have to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. I just had some comments I'd like to make about the proposal. A question came up earlier in the discussion as to what the proposal would be giving the residents, the current residents of Rogers Park. And I believe I have the answer to that question. I believe that the proposal would be giving residents more density, more congestion, less sunlight, more traffic, and I think it would ruin the neighborhood. I'm completely and totally against it. If you've ever recently driven during the rush hour period from Morris to Devon, it can take close to a half hour to get from Morris to Devon during a rush hour. There's too much congestion, too much traffic already. We don't need any more. And I was wondering what other options have been explored for the use of the property. As our alderwoman, has she tried to recruit maybe a chain restaurant, like um, something like Outback Steakhouse, or something like um, the the other chains that they have in the larger area. Trying to think of the names of
I think you're thinking of like a Chili's or something like that.
right, or
TGI Fridays.
yeah, something like that, or there's a couple like on Tui out west that I think are very good. The seafood one,
Red Lobster.
Red Lobster, and then the Italian one in the same area out there,
Olive Garden.
Olive Garden. Yeah. What have you done to try to recruit someplace like that?
Sure.
If
Sure.
you
No,
don't-
that's a great question. So I'll answer a couple of the questions. So I know the car congestion on Sheridan Road is rough. But I'll tell you, and I think you know this, you've probably lived here for a while. I think everybody can tell you most of that car congestion is from outside of our neighborhood. So Sheridan Road, and this was alluded to, I think, by Jeffrey, it's an IDOT road governed by the state because it's also it's US 41. And a lot of our traffic is from outside the neighborhood, right? People kind of going through. It is we'll say a blessing and a curse for our neighborhood. And one of the things about our ward that makes it a little challenging, especially for planning purposes, for vehicular safety, and for that neighborhood feel, is that we're bounded by Sheridan, Devon, Ridge, and Howard, which are all IDOT roads. So like our efforts around kind of traffic safety and traffic management, but particularly on Sheridan and Ridge are a little hampered. So I'll say most of that congestion is not from the local areas. And I didn't point this out. I think this might have been pointed out by a neighbor earlier. But when that was Leona's, there's a reason they had two parking lots, you guys, because they were congested and busy with a lot of traffic and cars. And so something that would be a similar use would bring a lot of vehicular traffic, arguably, possibly more vehicular traffic of a different kind than a residential use. To the second question, absolutely, Patrick. We've actually tried for all 6 years I've been in the office. I haven't gone for one of the chains because I don't think that'd be very Rogers Park. I don't think community members would want a Chili's or an Olive Garden or, things like that. But we have, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the meeting, and I know we've gone long, but we've worked with our local Rogers Park Business Alliance. We've worked with local businesses, existing businesses. We have had like about a dozen proposals that we've brought for this site. There have been a few lease agreements even in place, most recently for a brewery and pub that would have also had some music venue components. So there's been interest. The tricky part here has been the owner and the willingness to sell, the price point that he's had, and then of course for reuse of the current space, which was definitely the priority. Reuse of the space was kind of plan A, right? Like, hey, this is a beloved institution. We don't have many spaces like this. But that plan A became harder and harder and almost unachievable because of the way the property has been allowed to degrade. So to Connell there, that was the Reggie's proposal, right? So the brew pub kind of music venue place working with Reggie's, they couldn't get the funds to do the extensive work on the place that they weren't really quite aware of. But so yeah, Patrick, we've tried a lot, but we don't control the price setting or the ownership kind of component. And so these owner is currently got a tentative contract agreement with the people making this proposal. And should this proposal advance, they would purchase the property.
What about like a fine dining restaurant of some sort? Has that been explored?
We've got a couple of fine dining places in the neighborhood. I think we've got one, and that's moved into where the old fine dining place was. So I'll say there's been a lot shopped around and nothing has been viable. So that's where we're at there. But before I move on, do you have any other questions for the development team or myself?
No, I think I've pretty much given you my questions, and
And thank you for the feedback.
thank you for just being adamantly opposed. I've been in the neighborhood uh, where I'm at now. I've lived online for 41 years, and I'm just down the alley from the property, so it's going to have a great effect on me. And I completely opposed for the reasons I mentioned earlier.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
All right, Jonathan, and then Nancy, and then Areti.
Hi, thank you. Um, on balance, I definitely like this idea. Of course, there are cons, but I think it's good on balance. As far as the aesthetics, not horrible. I do get where the prison stuff is coming from. I I would first say I have a horrible eye for architecture, so take this with a grain of salt. Um, but at least the way it's rendered, those dark vertical lines that really stand out. Um, I get how they can be evocative of bars, even in a cartoony sense, if nothing else. I'm sure that those windows in real life are actually maybe just very tall, but I don't know. I wonder if that's where that's coming from. Um, one floor shorter, that would certainly look nicer, but we definitely need more housing. And if that's going to bring down the cost per unit and make this really work, it's not right next to the lake. There's what most, if not all, of a block from this building to the lake, if I remember correctly. So I don't think it's going to ruin the lakefront. I don't know that you can even see it from the lake necessarily. So I think, so if you soften up that first floor, like people said with the coffee shop, whatever it is, aesthetically, it's fine. Um, the back lot would love green space, but there's absolutely no point to doing it if it's only accessible by alley. I mean, you're not going to see it. I know I'm never going to go through the alleys to get there. So more parking sounds better just in that regard, or whatever else you come up with. But if it's a little park area that's only behind two alleys, I mean, when is anyone going to ever go there? Um, my only real question, and sorry for all the commentary, but yeah, again, I do like the idea. I do like more housing, and I do like the opportunity to be part of a community that wants to be welcoming and wants to provide housing opportunities. My only question is for Alderwoman Hatton or your office. You mentioned a survey earlier. I was a little late to this because I was still commuting from work. How do we participate in that survey?
Oh, so we'll send it out. So everybody who registered for the meeting, if you're not already on the newsletter list, we'll put you on the newsletter list. We'll send it out with the newsletter this week. And then we leave it open for 2 weeks. And then if you're not somebody, but some people, you can also just call or email comments too, if you don't like filling out surveys. But the survey is helpful to kind of put it in a format that works for us consistently. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. Nancy.
Alderman Hatton, we had some technical difficulties. I think we're back here now.
Yeah, I saw you're back. You're good.
Okay.
You're good. You came back just in time for the question.
Questions.
All right, Nancy, you're up.
One, I'd like to make a comment that I think having a development there is housing, I think is a good idea. I'm also inclined to think that that extra floor is a bit much. I want to avoid any sort of canyon effect on Lakeshore Drive. I'm concerned also about the water infrastructure. I don't know how well our aging infrastructure could handle that many more units, but I'm hoping that's going to be looked into. I applaud. It looks like from your slides that you're not putting in individual washer and dryers in units, which I approve of, because I think that increases electricity uses and increases water uses. It's probably a little bit better if people have to go down the elevator to use them in the basement. I will leave the car and traffic issues to the people who have to deal with car and traffic issues. I'm concerned about the setback. It doesn't look like there's any setback at all on one side of the building, and possibly not a whole lot on the other. I applaud the courtyard. I think that's a very nice thing for your residents, but setback on Sheridan and Morris makes a big difference in making the street walkable and more livable. And I have a question about the windows. Will people be able to open their windows? I know that from looking at the mock-up, it doesn't look like anybody would be able to get a real cross ventilation. But this close to the lake, it would be practically a crime not to give people an access to that lakefront breeze. And so if I suggest strongly that the windows that you allow them to be opened, even though I do think that unfortunately in this day and age, central air is probably mandatory. I don't know if anybody would move into anything but an old building without central air. Are the windows going to be open?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Openable?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, good, great. Then one other thing that I would like to add to this is you're right on the lakefront. That's going to be the tallest building from on that block. And so that's going to be sort of, taller than all the buildings east of it. I would really like to hear a commitment for bird-friendly glass. It's done wonders. We all know about the 1,000-bird die-off they had at McCormick in just one day. And obviously we're not getting those, anything like those numbers any place else because we don't look like McCormick Place. But they put in bird-friendly glass on just one section, on the worst section, and it has had a remarkable impact on the number of birds that are hitting that building. It is right off the lake, and birds, they fly in and they're going to see those lighted up windows and they're going to go straight for them. So, is it going to be a huge number of birds you save? But, if it's 100 birds a year, that's really significant.
Yes,
so
we do plan to use bird-friendly glass.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah, I would like to see it go down a level because I think that partially because of the traffic issue and everything else, and I just feel it looks tall. And then I guess my other big concern is setbacks. But
Yeah, thank you.
thank you.
So the building just adjacent to this development is a 5-story building. And the way that we've jogged the design of the building is at eye level. The building is at street level. The parapet is at a 5-story, and then the portion of the building is recessed in the back. That the sixth floor is recessed in the back. So from grade, it would actually only 5 floors are visible, and the sixth floor is actually stepped back, so you don't actually see it from grade. But thank you for your input. We'll definitely consider it. Everything that you've just mentioned.
Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy, and thanks for the notes on the bird-friendly design piece too. We'll have a hearing on bird-friendly design in the city's ordinance and 1 year of results in our July committee meeting, just as a note. Areti, you're up.
Hi, yes, thank you for having this call. This is my first time joining one of these, so it's been really great to hear from everyone's various opinions and also understand the approach to community engagement that's been taken in this neighborhood and in this instant. For the developers, I did have a question more generally about your community input process. It feels like in this moment, the input is very explicitly read the slides that were presented about names, branding, and like generating like abstract community buy-in that's necessary for the rezoning. And it's not very much about generating meaningful community participation. And with that note, I feel somewhat remiss that like the explication of the zoning implications were kind of saved until like 2 hours into this call, when that seems to be the core element of decision making power for the community. So that's just maybe like a structural for the meeting conversation thing. Giving a +1 to everything that people said about parking in the area. It really is horrible. I've lived in this area for 4 years now. And I am somebody who relies entirely on public transit and walking places. And truly, it is horrible when anyone's coming to visit. If they come after a certain hour, if they come over the summer, it's such a challenge, and it makes it very difficult to get people to want to spend time in Rogers Park, even though it's such a vibrant community that's so beautiful and so wonderful for so many different reasons. So, I mean, I think that people come to Rogers Park essentially if they have a car or if they live on the east side of Chicago. Like whether it's north or south, like that's the main core of the issue. And I see the comment, so we shouldn't fix the CTA. I'm all in support of that, but that's not what this meeting is about. So I just wanted to point to that as an issue. And then again, pointing to the 7,000 Glenwood building as an example. I live right across the street from that one and have seen the difference between when that was built versus like the years before that I've lived in this area. And it's gotten significantly worse, even though I think that, made a big deal about having extra parking above the city requirement because this is a transit oriented zone. So I just think that that's something to consider because it does make a challenge for bringing people to the neighborhood, even for like community events, like the free screening that was just hosted by the Wild Onion Co-op just last week, or even other community spaces along Glenwood. So it's not just bad for residents, but our guests, consumers, beachgoers, etc. I also think that owner occupancy is something that is not really considered in this proposal. It seems like it's designated maybe entirely for renters, and I do think that despite the fact that Rogers Park is pretty largely rental occupied, I think Maria said 70%. I think that that's a great thing, but I also think that when people have a longstanding stake in a community, then there's a little bit more of an investment in its like long lifespan. So I guess I'm a little bit bummed to hear about like a property management company coming in, setting rents, etc. When you could have more housing that is potentially owned by people that have like a vested stake in the community as opposed to a development company. And then the last thing, or the second to last thing, is a +1 on what we've heard about concerns around like water infrastructure, traffic, accessibility, wanting some sort of setback and a space that invites in community members, not being situated in like an alley or even on a rooftop or something like that. Because I don't think I've ever walked past an apartment building and was like, let me see if there's a space for me to, be involved in that residential space that belongs to someone else. So yeah, those are my big points. I think ultimately I just would love to see more like innovation and imagination in the creation of community spaces, whether it's like residential, whether it's mixed use. I think that this feels like anyone could have created it. It doesn't feel like it's designed for Rogers Park. It feels very generic and very like basic, to be honest, in a way that I feel like we can do better. Um, yeah, I'd love to see more retail space. Like I think one is great, maybe two is great, or even something like a co-working space or like an artist studio, like something that encourages people to spend more time in the neighborhood and get more of their needs met and then it generates revenue for all the other local businesses as well as whatever residential space. I'm sorry, retail space that you are planning to provide would be wonderful. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, thanks for your input. I really like the idea of that co-working space. I don't know if anyone else is interested in something like that. We could definitely look into it, dedicating some space for a use like that.
Thanks, Areti, and thank you for your patience. And no, like a lot of the feedback can also, like I said, we've got this here. You can elaborate on things in the survey. I will note on the co-working space, so it's tricky sometimes because I know we do have community needs. A co-working space, artist working space is certainly one of those. And so I think it's great when it comes up. I will say we had a promising meeting last week with an existing business that is looking at an existing property along Morse Avenue, perhaps to do just that. So it's always, even if it's not something that's possible in every proposed development, it's good to hear like other things that people need. And then I'll just commiserate with you on the parking piece. So Rogers Park was the first neighborhood I lived in when I moved to Chicago. And for a long time, I only had friends that lived on the red line and maybe the brown line, for sure. Tom, you're up, followed by David and then Courtney.
I had to unmute myself there. So, Maria, thank you for putting this meeting on. I live on Farwell, right behind this, pretty much behind where this building's going. My first concern is Rogers Park is all I've heard tonight, and I agree with everybody, is an extremely special neighborhood. I was born and we lived right over on Wallen Avenue, right next to Clark there, our family, in a two flat. I am totally, the density is unbelievable of what's going on here. And I do know with the zoning that this, you can go down to 100 square foot units, SRO units. My question is, they keep talking about 600 and 1,000 square foot units. What I'm seeing in those drawings is maybe 400. You got 2 10 by 10 bedrooms. None of this is family friendly. This is kind of transient, kind of friendly. Be here for a year and go. It doesn't seem to fit the neighborhood at all. If it was going to be this type of size, the density needs to go way down. I would think it does not. What do you think, Maria?
I am open to listening to everybody's suggestions. And, I know I tend to push for a bit more on the family size units myself. And, so much of, I'd say some of the previous new developments, you guys know we don't get a ton of new buildings, but I know we've talked about like that last building space on Morse. A couple of the other new buildings, probably over the last decade, have really focused on like studios and one bedrooms. So I'm happy to see a push away from that.
That's kind of what this is, Maria. This is very
I know.
much a.
I don't know. Hey, I'm not, this is just their first proposal. So I'm not making an opinion here. I'm happy to see a push away from that. And certainly in some of the other developments, we're looking for it. But I think that's the kind of feedback that we are looking for.
And then my next
Maybe we
concern,
need bigger units or lower density. So it's fair feedback.
this is a very big concern is where does it end? And do we keep pushing down? I know that these houses on Morris, there's very big need for housing. So why don't those just get torn down and go into the zoning? But hey, let's make it a little less zoning. But let's just keep doing the same thing in Rogers Park everywhere. Where does it end?
Well, nobody's tearing down homes in Rogers Park and putting in giant buildings.
No, that could be next. That's what I'm saying.
I don't think, not unless you guys sell your homes, and then we'd have to go through major zoning changes. I don't believe that's not in my plan. There's plenty of other lots and places on Morris Avenue. So I don't think it's fair to I don't think you have to worry about that while I'm in office.
Okay.
I will say that. Yeah.
And then as far as the alley use, I don't know if you know it or not, there was a fence put up years past where garbage trucks cannot get down
because of the
Farwell anymore.
That post piece, yeah.
And then this has to be taken into consideration. Next thing is we can hardly squeeze through on Farwell waiting for the light and cars coming into Farwell and coming out. No one's talking about the tremendous traffic. This is now people are to make a choice to go the other way. how are you planning on handling the traffic on Farwell if this happens? Something you have to think about too. Um, and then to the developers, you said every unit has a balcony. You made that comment. Is that true?
No, we said we were considering it. So if we can, we'd like to incorporate as many units as possible with balconies.
So that's one thing that would make it a better place for people to live if you did put a balcony in every unit.
We do have the
I
renderings
don't.
have balconies in a lot of the units already.
Yeah,
And the
sure.
idea
Yeah,
is that
I
we
get
try
it.
to get it to majority of the
I
units.
get it. You really couldn't do that probably. And then the let me ask the not the courtyard people calling it, but the light well you have to put in for code for windows on both sides so you can accommodate bedrooms facing each other.
Right.
What kind of material will that be made out of?
If you look at the
Just,
design of
talk.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's preliminary at this point, but if you notice, most of our design elements on the exterior facade are brick leaning. So it's just solid brick, and if we can incorporate that in the courtyard space, we would do that as well.
So I'll
It would
make a
be a blend of
suggestion.
it would be a blend of different materials. And again, this is not the final design.
Right.
This is
Right.
very
So
preliminary. It's going to go through multiple reviews.
I'll make a suggestion, even if it gets downgraded in size, which I hope it does, that the light wells are white to help reflective light and energy use in the lower units, because those light wells get really, really dark as you go down to the first floor. And when you
A
go to
light well, so a
Europe,
typical light well, just because this has been mentioned a couple of times, a typical light well is 3 feet 6 inches, right? 4 feet.
Like 5 by 5 is the.
It was 5 by 5. This space
each
is
building has
almost
to accommodate a
this
Hey,
space.
hey, Tom, we're having trouble hearing Sal respond because you keep talking over him. Finish with the
I
response for Sal
apologize.
about the light well.
I apologize.
Yeah, so a light well typically is about 4 or 5 feet by 5 feet. That's a light well. This is not a light well. This is nowhere close to a light well. It is literally more. Yeah, it's more than what the city of Chicago requires 3 feet from a window for natural light. This is not 3 feet. This is not 5 feet. It might be about 20 feet away. So it is literally an entire building in between the two buildings of space. So I just want to clarify that because that might be misleading to the audience.
What about visitor parking? Because you're talking about too many units, but let's just say it goes down to 40 units. What about visitor parking?
I mean, we have parking spaces that we're proposing. The use of those spaces would be. Sorry, Alderman, were you saying something?
I was letting my wife was just saying, "Hey guys, this meeting's going long," and I said, "I only have two more hands raised."
Yeah.
So visitor parking hasn't been considered at all?
Well,
No, I haven't.
yeah, there's no specific visitor parking that we've considered. So most, like we said earlier in our study, the majority of parking in these developments are actually in TOD sites are actually underutilized. So if we were building a 1-to-2 parking ratio, what's actually utilized based on studies is 0.29 or something like that. It was in my slide. Again, that's not our numbers. These are from research that we picked up. And so the idea is that if there are utilization of, let's say, 0.30, there's still going to be empty spaces. We don't, a lot of tenants, especially with around TOD sites, are not using cars. And like I said, in comparison with other projects, we actually have more parking proposed than some of the other projects that are built in that area.
So you keep talking 1,000 square foot units, 600 square foot units. Are you serious about 1,000? How many of those units? Would that be 50%? And then the affordable units, will you guarantee certain sizes for those units? 1,000 square foot for each of those?
Those are decided by the city, Tom. So like they basically the development team proposes their full site plan. So like, let's say to your point, they finalize, hey, these 16 two-bedroom, 1,000 square feet, to 800 square feet, one bedroom, on each floor, whatever their mix is. So when it comes down to the 20% affordable, as well as the accessible requirements, they have to be an even distribution. of like
So
units, both across the affordability and the accessibility. So they don't get to pick and choose which ones are affordable.
yeah,
So Maria, it just goes back to my original thing, is the density. I feel like it's extremely high. I'm glad there'll be a project there that will house people. Just the density's not even close to, it's extremely wild for what we live in here in Rogers Park. And then I'm very concerned about the
I
alley
would like
traffic.
to remind everyone that just a quick drive or a minute drive, you will pass hundreds, if not thousands, of units in that area. So adding 80 units of density is a drop in the bucket.
Right, and
But
there's 15 to 20% vacancy in all those buildings up and down Sheridan right now.
There's no building there with amenities that I've come across that has vacancy.
yeah,
That is what you have.
yeah. So the last thing I'll say before I move on to David and then Courtney, our final two hands here, is I did drop in the link there, and this is Areti. I should have mentioned this for you too, but for Tom, I don't know any place, like we're not a suburb, and we're not an area where people have visitor parking for kind of places. But I will say we do have a number of parking garages. So I dropped in the chat a link. We keep this under the resources tab on my website, under, excuse me, the services tab on our website. We have a lot of information about parking, zone parking, but also a list of all the parking garages. So there are a lot of parking garages, especially for visitors. I know it can get costly for like, hey, you paying for overnight parking, but when we're talking about visitor spaces, because we're only 2.2 square miles, we do have such great transit options. I just want to make people aware that, especially if you've got family visiting, folks coming in town, the parking garages are a pretty good option for folks, and then drop that in the link there.
The reason I bring it up,
Yes.
the reason I bring it up is because there will be 20 visitors on a given Saturday parking on Morrison on Farwell and taking into resident spots.
And it's something I think when we're looking at that, especially like I'm very sensitive to all of the east of Sheridan roads and the challenges with the parking. I think there's something we can look at on like the zone parking piece, what we can change around the zone parking, and of course restricting, right? Like we don't have to
Yeah.
necessarily allow residents at this building to qualify for the zone parking permit thing, which can also at least help with that a little bit, as long as we also make sure we have enforcement. Right? Yeah.
Where would that parking lot in the back empty out to? Where would it go? Into the alley? Or is there other openings for that?
It's
Are
the
there
alley.
other-
The same plan, it's just to the alley. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So there's no other openings anywhere else out the Farwell?
No.
No, there's not.
Okay. Okay. And I guess I'll go back to my original statement. This kind of seems too large for what we have in Rogers Park right now. There's a beautiful big lot on Pratt that could probably do the same thing with. Pratt's a bigger, easier street to get out on. But that's it. Thank you for your having this meeting.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you. All right,
Yep.
David, you're up, and then Courtney.
Hey, everybody. So, this this development kind of hits very close to home for me. I'm actually looking across at the street at the abandoned Leonas right now. And while I appreciate everyone's, kind of worry for my view, I think my opinion is just block my fucking view. Please. I actually really like the density of this project. And, I look at these things and it's kind of like, it's a trade-off, right? Like, yeah, we could take the side, you could take a floor off, but then suddenly those 16 affordable units, which everyone likes, don't pencil out. Or, you have to jack up the prices enough to make up for all the other units.
Absolutely.
And then, yeah, and then suddenly the only people who can afford it are, five Loyola kids with trust funds who seem to be exactly the people no one wants to move in. Or, suddenly you can't put in that green space anymore. Or, you know, the only thing you can take out without completely messing up the economics are parking. And that seems to be the one thing everyone really wants on this. So, you know, I look at developments like these, and there's always a better development out there. There's always, you know, this theoretical development that's going to meet everyone's things and be perfect for everyone, be the right density, be the right price, have tons of affordable housing, have enough parking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, but the way I look at it is it's a choice between something that came up, a proposal that works, and an abandoned Leona's. And for me, I kind of would rather have whatever it is rather than just, you know, spend another 3 years looking at. I moved it here in 2022. I can't remember exactly when Leona's closed. It was during COVID, but you know, I think it seems to me that the alternative to this is just another 3 years looking at that. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, this seems great to me. Like, yeah, I agree with everyone. The co-working space sounds great. You know, the cafe I would love. It would be great to be able to walk over and get some nice coffee. The aesthetics, I could go either way, I guess. But you know, it seems like a really good project that's well thought out. And I think it would be, you know, a shame to like just get rid of that because we think there's something that's going to like kind of meet everyone's wants and needs and greatest desires. I do think the other thing that I don't get about what people said is that it's out of place. If I remember correctly, it's 6 stories, right?
Yes.
I'm looking down there and I don't know how big that building is right on Pratt, that corner is. Has to be 10 stories. The one by it is 5 stories. It seems odd to kind of like focus on this. The building behind it is 4 stories. It seems kind of odd to really focus on how out of whack that is. It seems pretty in keeping with everything else I see on the street. So I think that's my opinion on that.
Thank you for your feedback, David.
Very well said.
Yep.
Thanks, David. All right, Courtney, you're up.
Build, baby, build. I want more housing in this neighborhood. My rent went up the most it has ever went up, and I've been in my apartment for about 6 years now. And each year that we fail to build new housing, I'm more and more concerned that I am going to get priced out of this neighborhood that I love. Are there any plans to have the sort of zoning process that the 48th Ward went through, like the Broadway plan, basically having just broad zoning just decided so that we can stop having these super long meetings and getting housing rejected time after 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 time. Any effort around that, specifically around Sheridan and Clark Street. There's a lot of potential to upzone Clark Street, and it just sucks that you have these single story buildings with zero housing on top when the city's just going to continue to grow. People want to live in this neighborhood, and more housing is how we can do that and keep the people who live here currently.
Thanks, Courtney. So we have done proactive upzoning on Western Avenue and on Howard Street, actually. I want to be clear too that it's not all upzoning, right? Like even what's happening in Broadway. So it's not about, hey, we're just trying to upzone everything so that we can have more density. I'd say it's planning and a process of kind of right size zoning and unifying things. And honestly, in our ward, it's a lot of corrective zoning of like, hey, this thing was spot zoned a certain way. It doesn't even make sense. So for Howard Street and for Western, we worked with our city planners. We worked with the Rogers Park Business Alliance and the city of Evanston and the city of Chicago with the One Howard plan. So a lot of community engagement to come up with what are the uses we want to see there. Great, based on that, what's the zoning? So I'll say the Vision Clark Street plan happened before I took office, but I know that it didn't include necessarily zoning recommendations, but uses. But a lot of Clark Street zoning is already pretty supportive of, if somebody wanted to add additional residential units, a lot of Clark Street zoning is already pretty supportive of that. I'll say I don't have any plans to have a big planning process for zoning for Sheridan Road. As it stands, Sheridan Road is pretty well developed and actually is one of our denser areas. We look at more of our commercial strips. And so there's the outlier like this. We had the single family, I think the only single family home on the block last year that owner occupied, and we approved a zoning change for them to make that a multifamily, multi-unit building. I think on Sheridan for now, there's a fair amount of density because we do have to. I will say we are one of the densest neighborhoods. I know there was some discussion about that in the chat. We're one of the densest neighborhoods in the whole of Chicago. And so people do live here because of the density. People live here because of the ease of walkability. I spent some time in Woodlawn today with Naomi Davis of Blacks and Greens, who's working on the Sustainable Square Mile plan in her community. And there are a lot of neighborhoods that would love to have our density. It's what supports our like thriving business districts and our locally owned small businesses. And at the same time, we do have infrastructure issues and challenges that sometimes that can put some limits on how dense we can be. And of course, different ways in which we want to live. We don't want a bunch of skyscrapers up and down all of our major streets. So it's definitely a balance. But I would also echo, I hear all the time some of the things that neighbors have said also on this call. We do need more housing. We need more housing overall for the city. We need more space for more people. And so it's all about a balance, right? So you guys I appreciate the time you've all spent here. My wife gave me a 9 p.m. cutoff and it's 8:55, and I'm going to listen to Natalia. I'll say now she's telling me. I'm just using her as an excuse, guys. She didn't really tell me. But this has been really thoughtful discussion. I appreciate everybody's thoughts, opinions, and engagement on this. Yeah, like this is feedback that we're going to take. We'll have the survey that comes out. You guys will have more opportunities to engage. Again, we don't have a ton of big developments. So there's work to be done here, but I think that we've got a development team that's willing to engage. So Sal and Mike, we appreciate you guys spending the evening with us. We didn't even get you dinner. So thanks for spending the night with us. And for everyone, we'll have this recording available. We'll have the survey that comes out this weekend. And thank you all.
Thank you, Alderman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone have a good night.
Yeah, thanks for holding it.
For times.